wait till I can see my face on TV.
Your face from glasses.
There we go. All right. Good evening, everyone. This is our July 20th. Oh, yeah, that's right. Planning board meeting at 6:30, and I think we'll start off with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. Okay, so our first agenda item is 6:30 MBTA continued discussion about community overview for the MBTA project, and Ines will give us a overview and everything else.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here again. For the record, my name is Emily Ennis. I'm president of Ennis Associates, and I am one of the members of the consultant team who's helping you in the town with this. Unfortunately, Chris Hurlick from RKG Associates could not be here tonight, so you are just getting me. And at the last meeting that we had with you all, you requested that we do just another set of scenario fit studies. So we have the results of that and some additional information based on some of the conversations. So I'm going to do a quick overview of the process, because I know some of the people who are here today may not have seen some of the earlier slides. Walk you through those final test scenarios and why we're doing them. I've added King Street Common to the math of the section 3A that I presented last time, so you can see everything together, and then we're going to talk about next steps. So with that, in terms of the overview, this project or this process is about understanding, first of all, whether or not the town complies with the MBTA Communities Act, and the answer is no, it does not currently comply. At least the zoning districts that we've looked at do not comply, which means the rest don't. We are looking at which zoning changes might be required for compliance, and that's what we're doing now. And as part of that, we've been doing these test fits. And then thinking about that in terms of, as we do these test fits, as we talk about the zoning, trying to understand which zoning changes the community would support, because obviously that has to go to town meeting at some point. And then we're working on draft zoning that's compliant for future approval at town meeting, and that'll be part of the next steps. So you see the grayed out boxes up there are what we've done so far. We're at the tail end of the community outreach and engagement with this final meeting, and then we're going to be moving into the draft zoning and obviously refining it and coming to a final set that would then be presented for approval by town meeting. And obviously future meetings with the planning board are part of that. So we've had a couple of meetings. We had an initial kickoff last year with yourself and some of the other boards and committees in town that have responsibilities for land use and housing. But in terms of the public engagement process, we started on February 9th. We introduced the MBTA Communities Act and what that means. And then we talked about, we did sort of mini visual preference survey, and what that is talking about different types of housing, different formats that multifamily housing can happen in. I'm showing some of the preferred results on the screen now, and asked people what they liked and what they did not like. March 8th, we did the first round of test scenarios. We had chosen the parcel that is closest to the MBTA tracks for that first round of test fits. And I'm going to pause here and talk a little bit about what test fits are. I'll probably refer to it again later. But in test fits, we're not trying to create a development that's going to go forward. These are not, none of these that you'll see on screens are actual projects. What we're trying to do is figure out what types of buildings could fit on, how many could fit on, and as we talk about the zoning going forward, start to think about how these test fits help us to establish potential rules in the zoning for development. And you'll see a little bit more as we move forward with this presentation about how that works. But I want to make it very clear that none of these are actual development projects. They're just test fits. So in June 8th, which is the last time we talked, the initial round of test fits prompted some questions about Are there other parcels we could look at? Are there different levels of intensity that we could look at? We tried to stay within the building types that we had identified in February, which are what are called missing middle housing. They range from 4 to 20 units, but as we per building. But as we looked at some of the other options, introduced some smaller lot sizes in order to get to the required density. If you reduce the lot size, you're going to have to go up to get to the same number of units. And I'll go into this a little bit more at the end when we go back through the math of 3A. So we looked at two other parcels, one on the other side of the rail tracks, one further down on the corner of Foster and Taylor, had some discussion over that, and was asked again by the board to look at another set of scenarios, which I'm going to go through. I will note that in addition to those two new parcels, we retested the parcel that is closest to the commuter rail station by testing only a portion of it, saying, well, what happens if that parcel was divided to get down to a smaller number of acres, what could you do on that? And you'll see in the yellow, and I know this is on also available on the town's website, I want to make it very clear that that is even more for illustrative purposes only, because what we were doing in that test is actually dividing a private property owner's land for the purposes of testing. That's not something, you know, I certainly have no control over what that property owner is doing, and neither really, it's privately owned, it's not under the town's control. So were something like that to go forward and a part of the property be divided in order to get to the ratio of units to land area that we've been talking throughout this, that's something that would have to be coordinated with that property owner. So just want to make that clear, because we're going to be looking at that parcel again in today's test fits, and so just stressing that that is not something that any of us in this room have, or any of us talking here today have control over. So today, I'm going to present the final test scenarios, because we're sort of at the end of that process. Present the revised math, just so people are familiar with how that works, and then also discuss how the scenarios feed into zoning options. So we're looking again at three different, three variations of parcels. We had started out with SGOD District 1, which is the yellow at the top right. The green in the middle, SGOD District 2, we're not talking about today. We did talk about that last time. And then SGOD District 3, we've divided into an east and a west. The west is what we talked about last time. We're also going to talk about west today and east today. And you can see the number of acres there is really important. So District 1 is just over 18. In the division tests that we're testing now, it is obviously in real life much larger. District 3 East is just over 20 acres, and District 3 West is the same 10.28 acres that we tested last time. And this is how it's going to break down. I'm going to read it out because I can tell looking from here that it's probably a little fuzzy for people at the back. So SGOD District 1, again, I mentioned just over 18 acres. We are showing 217 units. I'll explain why in a minute. That gives us a density of roughly 12 units per acre. SGOD District 3 West, that 10.38 acres, we're also showing the same 150 units that we showed last time. We're just doing a different layout to respond to some of the comments, and that density is about 14.45 units per acre. And SGOD District 3 East, so it's actually 20.175 acres, but it has excluded land in it, and we talked about excluded land at previous meetings. Excluded land is wetlands, it is other land that has been designated by the state as excluded from the denominator. So the actual net acres that we are testing, the acres that can be built upon, is 18.035, which matches the number of acres for the test on District 1. And the reason we're doing District 1 at 18,035 acres is because District 3 East is 18,035. In other words, we're trying to show an apples-to-apples comparison. Last time, when we just tested District 3 West, we showed the apples-to-apples comparison on District 1. So it was also carved out at 10.38 acres and 150 units. So again, that just gives us an understanding of how the different acres work together. So we're showing 217 units on both District 3 East and on District 1. And they both have that units per acre of 12.03. Now, it's important to remember at this point that if Littleton Common were the only, if these three districts that we're showing here, these three tests we're showing here, were by themselves. In other words, we didn't have King Street as part of them. All three of them would fail because they don't meet the 15 units per acre requirement. District 3 West comes closest, but it's not actually there. It's just under 15 units per acre. So what that would mean is if these were by themselves, we had to get to that level of density, is you would have to add more units to each of these developments to get to 15 units per acre. When we get to the math, I'm going to explain why these don't have to be there. We do have some room for movement on this side. So let's have a look at these. So this is West revised. We had shown this same number of units on the same number of acres at our last meeting in early June. What we've done here, if this will behave itself, yes, it will behave itself, good. So we had this original access to Foster Street on what we showed the last time. We've added an access to Taylor Street here because that was something that people wanted to look at, and then basically revised the layout so that it incorporated that access. The other thing that it does, and let's see if I can, I was looking for the red dot. So what you see along here, along Foster Street, and then as you turn the corner to Taylor Street, is these two buildings here in the lower corner, that's actually 4 units. They're styled so it looks like a very long single-family house. It was one of the things that was one of the styles that received a positive test back in February. These two up here are 10-unit buildings, and actually this one over here is a 10-unit building. So we've got 3 10 units on there. Again, that was a style that was preferred during the test. These 3 are 20-unit buildings, again tested in February, and then the last is the multi-story building, and I'm going to show you what that looks like in a bird's eye view. So that you can see that this combination of units gets you to a certain number, or combination of buildings gets you to a certain number of units. Now, understand, I think it's probably obvious to everybody, you could mix and match those units in different configurations. You could think about the parking. That parking is just a suggestion of parking. It's not necessarily the full amount needed, and when we go to zoning, we will have to consider the parking ratios, but it gives you an idea of layout. So very much this is not set as a developable project in any way, shape, or form. It allows us to test how big should the buffer be from the street, how tall should the buildings be at the street, can you have different levels of density on a deeper site, so that you have a lower level of density at the front and a higher level of density at the back. And in terms of both units and higher height. And you'll see on this one, we put the higher level back towards the highway. You'll see some of these choices play out in terms of how you put the buildings where in the next couple of sets. So this is east. This is the 217 units on 18 acres of developable land. The site is actually 20 acres. And you can start to see we're making some of the same design decisions to be able to test those. There's a wooded buffer, I believe that's about 50 feet or so. Then you have the lower scale buildings. These are all those 4 units. You have the 10-unit buildings sort of as you move towards the middle of the site. Nice little green area for layout, the 20-unit buildings, and then the taller buildings. These actually have a step down here sort of towards that lower height. Taller buildings either next to the highway or next to the wetlands. And again, this allows us to think about how we might set up zones, and I'll show you an illustration of the zones. And you get to see what this looks like in terms of the bird's eye for the layout.
Now, to do a one-to-one match of this side of the SGOD 3 East to the SGOD 1, and note again that yellow text talking about the fact that this is a property in which we're proposing for the purposes of this test to divide it. We don't actually have that control. But this is the same number of acres, of developable acres, same number of units as the one you just saw. Here we're showing it with a much, much deeper buffer to Foster Street, placing those taller buildings back up against the tracks on that side, a nice little green area there, a circular layout. Again, all of these things would change for a development, an actual development, and we've got that same mix of lower units at the front, taller units at the back. This was drawn this way because that red hatching is excluded land. So that entire parcel, as shown, does not have any excluded land on it. Again, were this to be divided in real life, you would probably see, or could see, a very different division. And that's a bird's eye view of it. In fact, you can sort of just barely see Foster Street at the front, shows how far back that development was placed for the purposes of this test. So where this gets us, I've been talking about zoning implications all along, but these red lines kind of give you an idea of the types of zones that we could have, and so I've called them out here. You would have a no-build zone for a particular distance, a specific distance from the street to the first building. You'd have a lower intensity zone, a medium height, lower height zone, lower intensity zone, a medium height, and a higher height. And what those heights are, what those intensities are, is still part of that discussion to get us to the zoning, but you can start to see how something like that could break out. And then we would talk about what that means. There's also that we go into zoning. It's going to be, how the access is done, how many curb cuts are allowed. Obviously, we want to have as much as possible a single curb cut onto whichever street. We'll talk about development standards. We'll talk about site standards, and some of those are here in this diagram where you think, okay, there would be standards for the buffer, and you can see how the buffer is not just the buffer along the street, but the buffer between buildings here. There would be roadway standards that would be tied into the town's current standards for how parking is laid out, how stormwater management would happen with it, standards for the open space. In fact, you could really think of this as kind of a campus-like development, and so we would have the rules in there that talked about the relationship to the street and the relationship of the interior components and program. And you can see so the same kind of idea. In this case, we've got a roadway circulation that involves 2 curb cuts, and so there would be standards for that. So I'm going to translate over to the math, and those of you who might have been at the last meeting will recognize some of the brightly colored boxes that you'll see after this slide. This just gives all the definitions. It hasn't changed much since the first presentation. And what I did was I broke it down into the data points and the calculations that are required. And so this was the one that I presented last time that talks about the Littleton Station. And this is important because you have a minimum requirement of 750 zoning for 750 dwelling units, not production, but zoning, but a requirement that of those 750 dwelling units and of the 50-acre minimum acres, 20% needs to be in Littleton Station. And so that's where the 10 acres and the 150 units that everybody talks about has come from. Now, you're not required to have just 10 acres and just 150 units. You could certainly do more than that. You just can't do less than that. And where that becomes interesting is when we add King Street Commons. So the numbers from the last calculation, which I think we presented at the first public meeting in February, the numbers for King Street Common are here. And what I've done is up here for Littleton Station, I've added the ranges from the 3 different parcels we tested this time. So together, Littleton Station and King Street Common, in terms of the math, get you to the right acres, somewhere between 51 and 60, get you to the right number of dwelling units, depending on how they're added up, and that's because King Street Common has up to 812, but there's some additional limitations in how that's doing. So there's going to be a range in how that happens.
And it gets you to the 20%, which doesn't apply to King Street Common, just Littleton Station, which means we also get roughly to the units per acre. Now, I think there's probably anybody who deals with math and charts and sits there and says, oh, we could just play with these numbers and we'll get it down to precisely 15 units per acre. I think at this stage, that's a little bit of a dangerous trap to go into, because there's a lot more that goes into zoning and zoning restrictions than just the things that we've talked about. So in our scope, what we would do sort of at this point after receiving direction is start to actually draft the zoning, see what it looks like when you put it together, and then we would have to run the model again, or maybe 2 or 3 times, to make sure that we get all the pieces that can go into controlling development on land right in terms of the model. So this is a good place to stop and for us to say, which areas would you like us to start developing zoning for? Are there particular parameters, like, for example, keeping that buffer at 50 feet, expanding it to 75 feet, shortening it to 25 feet, which I suspect is not the direction you might go into, but giving us some parameters to start working on the draft text and figuring out how those pieces would go together. So in terms of that, I'll just give you the next steps now so I can open it up for discussion. We are prepared at this point to start drafting the text, putting those different components together, seeing what the implications are, and I'm sure coming back to you at least once before the text is completely finalized, let you know where the direction we're going in, if there are any sort of changes that have to be made as we run the model. Then obviously getting your input and setting up the final text for you to start discussing. We assume that there will be changes before town meeting, and there might well be changes on town meeting floor, but at least getting you to the point where you've got something that you can test with the public before it goes to town meeting. And so that's where we are at this point. That's the full report, and happy to listen to any questions you might have, answer them if I can, or put them aside for future reference as we move to the next
Thank
stage.
you. Okay, I'm going to start with the board first, and I'll open up to the public. Who wants to go for any questions? Anna?
I think I'd rather hear from the residents first.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jeff?
So I just wanted to, the 3 parcels you presented, the east parcel seems to be almost the platonic ideal of what our ultimate goal would be, which would be closer to 150. However, in previous meetings, you have the west parcel, which is a certain size. So you took that size and put it on the one next to the train station, but there's nothing to say that that could go down to the 150 also. You just did that for apples to apples.
Yes. Yes.
So, I think people need to understand that that we've been told that we have to deal parcel by parcel, not in some, generic way. So, anyway, I just wanted to clarify that.
Yes, and to that point, the previous one we had matched the other parcel on the reds. I'll jump back to it just so we can make you all dizzy. I apologize for that. So in the meeting we had in June, we made the sort of cutout parcel in here equal in size to this one, so you can see the 150 to 150, and this one we made out that cutout parcel in size to that one, so you can see, okay, what happens to the layout, to the numbers. It just gives you that easier comparison. But to your point, if you're dealing with existing parcels, you have to deal with the existing parcels. Right. So for example, we could not go to EOHLC, which used to be DHCD now, for that yellow parcel and say, we've zoned it, but we're only doing 150 on 10 acres of that, but it's still this large parcel. They would say, no, that's
so
not
prior
allowed.
to that,
it would
have to be subdivided.
Exactly.
Now, could the division be in the form of conservation restrictions, or does it have to be an absolute?
It would have to be an actual, you have to do it based on the parcel, so it would have to be divided into one or more parcels, and then the parcel you wanted tested. And then obviously that's a future conversation.
Okay.
But the parcel could be left as open space.
Yeah, oh, yeah, no, I, obviously, yeah.
Just as two different, but still
But
two
still two
distinct
parcels that
parcels.
would
Yeah.
be conveyed to someone, you know.
Bartlett, you have
Right.
a question or concern? No. So I just want to, before I open up to the public, so what we're doing here, and I'm just reiterating what you said, we're putting together scenarios, sending it, finishing it off, bringing it to town meeting. The state, the two numbers that to me are important are the 150 units and the minimum of 10 acres. We go to town meeting, we zone it that way. 2 years down the road, we actually have a project, let's say, okay? If we come back and let's just, whatever parcel we pick, we want to make it bigger, I mean, more open space to it. Is the state really going to have a problem with the fact that we zoned it? We got our 150, we've got our multifamily, it's just a little more land. What do they care? Are they going to care? That's kind of the point I get.
So production versus zoning. Okay, so you've zoned, you've done the zone, town meeting passed it. The zoning indicates that it's going to give 150 over 10 acres, right? A developer comes in and the developer says, you know what, I really like the land as it is. I'd much rather do 100 units over the 10 acres or 90 units or 20 units, right? That's the developer coming in and saying, I would like to do this smaller project. And then they would put an application in front of you and, actually, sorry, let me stop. Normally, they would have put an application in front of you, but this is as of right zoning, so they don't come back to you.
No, I'm
Yeah,
not,
so they come back to the town, yes.
and I'm not talking that. I'm
Okay.
talking another scenario. We still have the 150,
Right.
but rather than have all the high rises, supposing the developer says, I want to just do single floor,
Oh, yes.
one level,
I see
but
what
I
you
need
mean.
more land to do it. Are we going to say, no, we've got our 150, we've got our minimum of 10 acres, we're going to give them 15 acres after the fact? Is the state going to care
Ah, so you're expanding the district.
after we've already
You're
been approved?
expanding the district after you're already approved, and that's going to change the numbers. You would have to go back to the state and say, we're still meeting our 50, say, that's the other, you mentioned two numbers?
Yep.
You have to meet that third number. You still have to, between King Street and this one, meet your 15 units per acre. So if you increase it, let's say you, the person bought two parcels, and they're now going to build over those two parcels, you're going to have to factor in how big those two parcels are, just as we've done now. So say, for example, they bought those two red parcels and they're putting those together. Now you have 10 acres plus 20 acres, you have 30 acres. In order to get to an average of 15 units per acre with King Street, you're going to have a different number of units. And so that's one of the reasons for figuring this out. That's where all those little colored boxes at the
Why
end.
would the state care if we did the bare minimum and then gave them even more? Like we wanted to do more open space. That's the point I'm getting at.
Because if it's developable land, and you've increased the denominator of developable land, in order to get to your average 15 units per acre, you're going to have to increase the number of units.
So it has to, everything's got to fit on about. 10
Everything
acres.
still, the math still has to work.
So
yes.
in other words, if I may, so let's say, for example, the entire parcel in SGOD 1 is used, what is that, 18 acres?
Not that entire, I think the entire parcel's like 32.
Okay,
yeah.
so if the entire parcel were to be used of 32,
Yeah.
and we had originally zoned 150 at 10 acres, and suddenly it's like, oh, you know what, we could use the whole parcel, we're not allowed to do that without increasing the number of units. That's effectively what you're saying.
First, you wouldn't be allowed to zone that entire parcel at only 10 acres. You would have to split the parcel into two parcels and zone one of them 10 acres. So then if somebody came back and said, under this zoning, I want to add that second parcel back again and do the whole thing. Yes, my understanding is, and I will confirm this since you brought the question up, my understanding is you would have to redo it. However, there is absolutely nothing stopping you from creating a new district for that second parcel that says, okay, now we're going to do the units here, right? Because with this, you're trying to meet the requirements of the MBTA Communities Act.
Well, I think part of what I've heard people say is, well, if we have all this land, why do we have to have it be so dense? And being able to get that question answered, I think, is really important for the residents to understand. Even though there might be a bigger parcel of land, we can't spread the houses out more to make them less dense. The whole purpose of this is density, right?
You could do that. This original one showed 400, 350, and 300 units, and of course, I did not put the units per acre on here, but this is that 300, and there's some number below that that would fit on the 32 acres and still get close to the density. That does spread them out more, but just think of it, if you have more acres and you spread out more units, you need more of those units to get to that final, whatever it is. Same thing is if you compress the land, and that's why the test on this parcel has such high buildings so close together, and that piece of land was so much smaller, so you have to get up to get to the same level of density.
So the net of it is then if you have a larger piece of land, it's going to increase the number of housing units.
It's going to increase
Okay.
the number of
So-
housing units,
so
but we
if
have
we
the
wanna-
possibility of spreading them out
Right, but if
more,
we
yes.
want to, limit it to 150 units, then we have to stick with the smaller, more dense.
It's going to have to be.
However, the way you can think about it is to take that 150 units on 10 acres and open space, and
Right,
then say
on that second-
150 units over 335 acres is...
Well, no, what you'd have to
Right,
do is split
No,
it
I'm
into
saying for the
two.
state, you have the 10 acres, the 150, but
Right.
we're talking about that entire parcel, and if it results in open space, an open space parcel,
Right,
then
right.
we're really reducing the
Right.
density over that
It's
entire...
two different parcels.
Right.
Yeah.
But we're really
Absolutely. Yeah, that I
reducing the
understand.
overall density
Getting
of
a lot
that
of open
parcel.
space
Yeah.
and we're squishing them all into
But
one.
legally, it
Just-
has to be
Right.
the small
Yeah.
parcel.
And just one thing to consider if you're wanting to talk further about splitting that parcel or that yellow parcel or any other parcel for that matter, is remembering or understanding what does that other parcel get zoned, right? Because it's not going to be zoned for the MBTA Communities Act.
Absolutely not.
So it either retains its existing zoning, whatever that may be for whichever parcel you're talking about, or you're going to have to rezone it to something else. So that's just something else
Right.
to keep in mind, because obviously, any property owner in any town has certain rights under existing zoning. If those, part of that changes and part of that doesn't, that's part of a conversation.
So right now, if we're talking about the yellow one,
If you-
it's zoned industrial. So
Right,
it's
exactly.
like
If you're talking
warehousing.
about that one,
If-
yeah.
If we wanted to, and we wanted to break it up, then we could zone the residential on this part. The other part, we could do a conservation restriction so that nothing else could be built on it as well, correct?
Well,
Or zone it that
you
way.
could talk with the property owner
Oh, yeah.
about
Right,
what-
right,
yeah,
right.
yeah.
No, we're not, yeah.
And that's 245 Foster.
That's 245, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh.
just to say that I think with talking with property owners, it's whatever's on the table between you and them. But
Right.
yes, in theory, you could zone one part for the MBTA Communities Act and one part, whatever you come up with.
And the
this
state would
agreement.
not have an issue with
No,
that.
because they're
yeah.
interested in
They're
that.
two different,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. I mean, as a planner, I might say if you're going to split up the parcels, make sure the housing side is closer to the transit
Yes.
side,
Right.
because that's,
That's
what
we're
makes perfect sense for a thought like that. But
Right.
other than that, I'm stepping back from that.
Okay, anyone else, before I open it up to the public? Okay, I'm gonna ask you to raise your hand, state your name, so Maren can have it for the record. Anyone want to,
And I'm
any
just gonna
questions?
move back so people can come up here to talk.
Nobody? No one wants to? Oh, shit. I'll start with you, Mr. DeCoste.
Chuck DeCoste, 619 Newtown Road, also member of the select board. So, based on what the Attorney General recently opined, I think it was relative to Holden, this is a mandate. If we are an MBTA community, it's a mandate, just like all the other unfunded mandates that we kind of get shoved down our throats, that the state is dictating that we have to do this. And if we want to better or beautify our community by adding more open space, if it's added into that same zone or district, it's going to require us to, as was summarized by the board, add more housing. So it's mandated that we have to do this, and we have to fit in this little box. It's 10 acres, 150 units have to fit in those 10 acres. If you want to have more land on that, you have to have the housing that would correlate to that 15 per acre.
Correct. And also, we have to do it, as you alluded to, if we were gonna ask the state for funding or anything else like that, they're not gonna be favorable towards us if we don't.
Well, she's already threatened Holden with lawsuits.
Yeah, but remember, Chuck, we could also divide a bigger parcel into two parcels. So there are ways to,
Manipulate the system.
yeah, yeah.
Mark, I think we're in session, the select board, I believe. We are agenda tonight, so it's one way.
Correct.
We do have a- correct, thank you. So I'll speak on, as a select board member as well. Gary Wilson, a select board. Just looking at it, I was just curious on what's stopping us from doing this on, say, the smaller, the green one that was up there, I think it was 2. Yes, it's higher density, and at the same time that we're zoning that, we zone all the other property for how we let the town vote on how they want to zone the rest of that property. Maybe they want to make it, I don't know, the most restrictive zoning we could possibly have in Littleton, so that this can't creep later on. I'm trying to find out why we
You're
wouldn't.
talking the green one that's right
Big
next to
rock.
the
Yeah.
train station? It's gonna have no open space, it's gonna have no.
Right, but it doesn't now. It's a tiny piece of land, it's right there, the density's there, but now we've got all those other larger parcels that at the same time, we can zone to something that we
Well, the issue,
put restrictions.
the other problem is, okay, so right now you have office buildings on the other parcel that's
Yeah.
there. In 45 minutes, you're gonna see a proposal coming before us to put warehousing on the yellow parcel, because something has to go there. We've been, as a town, and Maren can allude to that, it's like I can, I've been around for 35 years, we've seen 20 renditions of commercial space going up there. We've seen 150, 200,000, I think the last one we approved was, I think it's AT&T. We're gonna put a cell tower up there, they're gonna have a facility up there and everything else, so it's zoned industrial. It's not gonna stay as open space unless we decide to see if the developer, the owner of the property will do some housing there and leave the rest as open space. Otherwise, it's gonna be, sooner or later, it's gonna be developed. If you, like I said, if you stay for 745, you'll see that, but it's not gonna stay as residential. As
Well, is it
open
right
space.
of first refusal property?
It's not 61A,
Okay.
it's commercial, it's industrial land. The other one, the green one, is, the person that owns it, the big company that bought it, is a huge company that's dealing in commercial
Yeah.
space. They bought it as a commercial entity, as not for residential, they own tons of residential, they bought it specifically, and it says right on the side, their industrial division, because they need industrial space. So I doubt very much they're gonna be receptive to rezoning it for that. And the other thing we have to.
Do we have a say in that?
No, we don't have a say, we're not property, we don't own it.
But I'm saying the town can rezone that land for this housing that we're
So that's the
discussing.
requirement.
If they're never, and they're
We've
never
met the
gonna,
requirement.
but they're not gonna build on it.
Okay.
So then the state gets involved and says it's not feasible because no one's ever gonna develop it.
Would they though? I mean, I think the requirement is to zone the property, a piece of
Yes.
property for this housing.
It's
Yeah,
for the
but why
zoning,
would
not
you
for the
wanna
actual
take,
structure.
but why would you wanna take away possible commercial tax revenue from an industrial space? I mean, we desperately need it in town.
Well, we're doing that now in a major way.
No, we're not,
No?
it's zoned, right now, there's nothing on it. We're gonna put residential on it. The other thing is, that I guess as the town, we have to
The yellow
decide.
parcel has nothing on it.
What?
The yellow
parcel
parcel.
has nothing on it.
Has nothing on it. The other issue is, do we really want to engage in actively trying to change the housing in the town of Littleton? Do we want to keep going with $1 million four-bedroom houses, or do we want to try to put something smaller, more affordable to change the not to change the demographics, but to allow people that live in the town of Littleton to be able to stay in Littleton? I think that's the reason that we're really.
Well,
doing
I don't
this.
think, I would argue, I think the reason downtown and what we're doing down there with the Lapoli property, absolutely. This we're doing because the state is mandating it and driving it down our throat, not for the best interest of Littleton, but for the best interest of the state.
But it also gives-
I just want to, I mean, that's why we're doing
I
it.
think, I could disagree with that.
We
but
wouldn't
I
have
don't
done this
think
otherwise.
is-
We would
We're
have done
trying.
this.
We've been at it for 6 years, but the other issue is,
We've
these
been
are for
working on it
sale
for 4
units.
years.
They're not gonna be for rent units, they would be for sale units, so that means first-time home buyers and things like that would have an opportunity. I think we have to be realistic in the fact that we really want to do the best job we can. Yes, the state's ramming it down our throats, but we want to do something that makes sense for the town of Littleton. And if keeping the open space, and the 150 is a lot better than the 500 we were looking at 3 years ago. I think we have to think about that as opposed to putting high-rises right next to the train station where there's no area for anybody to even go outside of their unit. It's basically, you've got the whole parcel. But anyway, can I
Yeah,
ask
please.
other people? Yes, way in the back. Oh, another selectman. Can I ask somebody before who's not a selectman?
Public.
You had your hand
Sure.
up, sir.
Solomon Marini, 149 Hartwell. We've talked about the math a little bit, and it's still not clear to me. We've got some number of units and some number of acres at 550 King that are included, and we combine that with 150 units at the train station. What is the maximum number of acres that we can put those 150 units on and still meet the density requirement?
10.
It's 15 per acre.
It's 15 units.
Then you're over 15. for
Oh,
your
I'm
acre.
sorry,
You're combining
yes,
these two for a total of 15, correct?
Yes, I understand what you're asking. Sorry, I didn't mean to be so flippant. Yeah, I did not, I think when we worked it out at the beginning of the process, it was somewhere between 9 and 12 units per acre in this area, plus the King Street
So
to get to
why are
about
we not
15.
seeing 9?
Because test studies, test fits, and zoning are two slightly different things. We need room in writing. Where we are with the test fits now gives us an idea of what can happen on different parcels. But when we write the zoning, we have to go back and test the implications of everything that we write. Because what we've been showing you are layouts. What goes into the zoning is parking, which is not tested in here, heights, setbacks, which are partially tested in here, open space requirements, potentially FAR. In other words, there's a lot of different dimensional standards that will play a role. We're going to have to go back and retest everything. So what we're wanting to know is direction as to which parcels we're writing zoning for. We can write the zoning, retest, make sure we get closer. The zoning might get you down to a lower number of units. We just don't know that until we've written
Well, no,
it.
we can't go to the lower number of units.
I
That's
mean,
the-
a
so-
lower density, my apologies.
Right, so
Yeah.
that's what
But I
I'm
don't know that
struggling
until we
with-
start writing it.
Okay. I mean,
So-
it seems like you could be a lot closer to 30 acres in District 1 and still meet.
I don't think it was that high. I can go back and look. I don't think it was high. But my point
Unless the math is more
again,
complicated than it appears.
my point, well, it is a little bit because, don't forget, depending on which parcel you do, you have the excluded land. And so, for example, that yellow parcel, we very carefully drew our test fits to avoid the excluded land. If we drew them a different way, the excluded land would come in here and it would do the denominator. And all of that is in GIS and is spitting out that information to us. So what I'm saying is these were designed to show different levels of intensity for different implications to get an understanding of which parcels we should write the zoning for. We still have a couple more steps in this process. So it's a little bit dangerous to get too close to the perfect number now and then find that we have to go backwards when we're actually writing the zoning.
Matthew?
Hi, Matthew Nordhaus, also a select board member. One of the things that seems to come up is we want to increase open space, but we're restricted to 10, let's say 10 acres for the arguments in order to get the density that we need. We don't have any money necessarily to buy the open space, which we often get from a developer by a payment in lieu or an agreement and a special permit. But would the state allow us to make a deal with the developer where we say, okay, take the big 30-acre property, subdivide it, not subdivide it truly, but create two zoning areas in it, one which is the MBTA zone and one which is open space. The developer would pay for leaving the 20 acres in open space, but I wonder if the state would say, well, no, you can't do that. You're basically taking this whole parcel and making it part of the MBTA thing. We're not going to allow you to subdivide it. I don't know if you have any idea whether that's true or not.
She said it was true, we could do that. That was the scenario right off the
But
bat.
it would be legally two different zones.
Yes.
That's what we're talking
Yeah,
about.
that's what we're talking about.
But tied together with an agreement with the developer, would that stand the test of the state saying that they're actually separate? That's my question.
cannot answer that question. So I think you're straying into a legal territory that's beyond the level that I can do. But my understanding in doing the test, which is what has to be submitted to EOHLC, in doing the test, you have to test separate parcels, and it is the zoning that you're testing. If there is a development agreement on a parcel within the MBTA Act, that the MBTA zone that limits the number of units below what's needed, that would be problematic. If there's a development agreement for a parcel that's not within the zoning, I think that's a question that would have to be asked for EOHLC.
Mr. Sanders?
George Sanders, 672 Great Road. Mr. Chairman, my concern is environmental. The state is mandating that we put this in Littleton. Whatever number of units you're gonna put over there, whichever one you're gonna take it, it's 150 units. I'm concerned about the waste. Now, we're putting in a septic, not a septic, but a sewer system expansion here off of King Street for the town of Littleton. Now, this is over across from Taylor Street, Foster Street over there. Is the state concerned about the environment here in Littleton? About how do we handle the sewer from this project that they are mandating that we put in place? Because if they are, then I think what they should do, whatever number over there, they either, if they're gonna go septic, you got to create enough space over there to put this in, and if not, which I don't know why they would be going that, I think they will put money in to bring a line off from King Street over here to take it down Taylor Street over to Foster Street and tie it into our system, and that unit over there, environmental, we will be safe with the disposal coming from the 150 units over there. And I think that if they're going to mandate that we do something, I think that this town needs to ensure that the state is concerned about the environment down here, because the Clean Water Act is saying clean up the water. We're not cleaning up the water. We're putting more nitrogen in the ground when we put in septic system. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. If I take a couple more, we're running a little late. Yes, sir, right in front.
I just have one question.
Name, please, for mine.
Yeah, Anthony Rislow, 290 Foster Street. And I live on Foster Street, and I think the one thing I'm concerned about, I didn't hear it mentioned, is you're talking about adding 217 units anywhere on Foster Street. Has anybody thought about what that's going to do to traffic on Foster Street?
It's 150 for starters, that's what we're talking about.
Okay, so it's 150, so then it brings it down from 325 cars to maybe 275, but still, it can barely handle what it has to handle now to get to the train station.
Well, obviously, this is a zoning issue. Once we're done with that, then obviously we'll have to have traffic studies done
Okay.
and things like that. But for right now, we have to, the state is telling us we have to present something to them sooner rather than later.
Okay. So premature for that question.
Thank you, sir.
Jeff Tully, 70 Stream. I've heard that, so I guess I'm looking for specifics if we just tell them no. If we tell the state no. What does, specifically, what does that mean?
We'll never get a dime from this. We have $9 million pending right now with the state for MassWorks funds right now.
Okay.
We won't see that. We won't see anything the following year for any money that we ask for. They'll never fix our roads again. The state is not messing around. They're adamant that the cities and towns that they've earmarked as the MBTA communities has to do this. And they're gonna sue us if we don't, and never give us any funding if we don't. So
Okay.
we're
Yeah, I just wanted the specifics of exactly
yeah,
what.
they're not messing around.
Yeah, okay.
Millions of dollars a year.
Yep, understood.
Chuck, you mentioned the Holden ruling. Could you explain what that is?
Basically, Holden's pushing back,
And they're saying
AG Campbell is saying-
we're gonna put you through the grinder and, okay. I mean, when we first started this, we were told that there's a variety of grants that, I mean, Littleton, to its credit, in the last period of time has gotten its grant writing up to speed. And we've received a lot of grants. And I think the number, whether it was just off the top of people's heads a year or two ago, was $3 million. And they're for various improvements in the roads and this and that and everything. And they are definitely things that we couldn't afford to do ourselves. I would just like to remind people that we have a train station there. And it is odd that we have this complete nexus of transportation systems, 495, Route 2, a train station right at this site. This is the poster child for providing a way for people to live there. I mean, that we probably wouldn't be doing it if the state wasn't forcing us to, but it's not crazy.
Jack, may I say something? We
Yeah.
actually were looking at doing it.
I know.
It's part of our master plan that
I
the
know, we
residents
were
of
looking at
South
it,
Littleton
but
voted
we
on.
weren't making.
We've been looking at this for 6 years
Yeah,
already.
but we weren't making
And it's
progress
also-
on getting it through.
Right, but, yes, that's true.
Yeah.
There were some issues we were dealing with, but this, I think it's incorrect to say that we have not been looking at it. We've been
Oh,
looking
that's
at it
true.
very
Yeah.
seriously, and especially because people cannot afford to live here. I mean, everything is a 1 acre plot of land and not, I mean, that's the whole problem in Massachusetts, which is why the state is doing this, so that people can afford to live someplace.
So we need to send a decision over, because we have to go to the next step. What parcel do we want to proceed, go forward with? We need to decide that amongst ourselves.
Okay.
I think if we can work with the developer on the yellow parcel 1, and cut it in half, and put more open space there, and put the density there right next to the train station, which is what we're doing, I would like to see that. I'd like to.
Well, I think some of the other planning efforts going on in town include open space and recreation and bicycle and pedestrian. And it's been proposed as an ideal to provide a bike lane from Harwood to the train station along 495. And open space in that area would be great. It would be a start. The second thing is, there's also talk, I'm just spitballing uses for this open space that would result after the subdivision. There's talk about the need for additional septic fields for expanded septic. There's a lot of things that this would key up. It would certainly not affect the abutters. We don't have any contact with the nursing home owners, but it seems like in my view, if we could subdivide to get 150 units, which is the minimum, meet our requirement, we could find some other way to zone the rest of that parcel.
We could put the whole we could find, okay.
I mean, again, this is all dependent on the developer.
Yeah,
or the
it's all
owner,
dependent-
On the
yes.
private.
So obviously,
yeah,
we're gonna
private
have to
property.
make sure that we engage them
Right.
and find out if they're interested in
Yeah.
it. But if that's the case, I would like to move forward with that. And Bartlett, what do you think?
You have another question in the back, Mr. Chairman.
What?
You have another question in the
I'm not,
back.
I'm not taking any more questions. I'd like to hear from
She had
the,
her hand up.
Excuse me,
You didn't
Mr.
see
Chairman,
it.
I don't have a question. I am ZBA, and we were scheduled for this room. Can I just open and postpone my meeting?
sure.
Thank you. You're welcome to finish this one, and then I'll do it, if that's all right.
You were scheduled for 20 Foster,
Pardon?
the fire station? The hearing
My
notice.
agenda is set here. Thank you for telling me that. Thank you.
Sorry, Sherry.
That's all right, thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, could I add, I'm on at 7:45, I know you have discretion to take it out of order.
Mhm.
What did you say may bear on your discussion? If you have the indulgence, I can because I represent the property.
Okay, do you want to wait till we decide this?
Well, what I may say may have some input into what you're debating.
I actually think we should wait, Mr. Chair.
I think we need to finish what we have, and then you can.
No, I mean, I think that,
You wanted to hear what,
I think it's important, and so my perspective is this. I do believe that a couple of years ago, there was a great uproar from the residents in the Foster Street area about traffic. And to that end, I would prefer the SGOD 3 West because it allows 2 egresses from the development, and it keeps the traffic that doesn't need to go to the train station away from that area. That's my personal preference for that reason. Now, if you all are residents of Foster Street, I would highly suggest that you speak up about what your preference is, because I'm going to listen to you. And this is a great opportunity for you to do that. So if the developer has, if the developer's representative for the 745 informal discussion of 245 Foster Street is going to speak, I would respectfully request that our board wait and listen to that, and then we
Okay.
readdress this with the
I have
public
no
again.
problem with that, would you? Yes?
Sorry, I just wanted to say one more thing. There's a certain amount of starting the zoning drafting that I can do without a specific property. And then at some point, I've got to tie it to a specific property. So if it's something where the board, again, wants to wait, I'm actually going to stay because I wanted to hear that discussion because I knew it would have bearing on this. So if you want to wait till the end of this meeting or to your next meeting to make the decision about a property, that's fine. I can get started on the other pieces. I just wanted to let you know that we were done with it.
Okay, yes, sir. You want to get up and present? Yes,
Take me on the board? No.
yes. Your name for Maren and everything else?
You want my stuff on the other?
I won't read. Good evening. For the record, Robert Buckley, Reben Bronstein. I'm representing the property owners of the yellow parcel, 245 Foster Street. I'm here this evening because we knew this was a discussion item for 3 reasons. One, so that we could advise the board what we're thinking of doing with respect to preserving our rights in the property and what the property is currently zoned for and will continue to be zoned for about 8 years, no matter what happens at town meeting. Because we will file a preliminary subdivision, follow with a definitive, and under Massachusetts law, you get a zoning freeze. That being said, I'm also here to say, and I'm aware that this has been going on for 6 years, and my specialty is across the state doing housing and mixed-use developments, that the property owner is willing to work with the town to explore alternatives to achieve the objective. You can subdivide the property. There's a draft that I'm showing you this evening. I think we could do 4 lots, put 4 commercial buildings, industrial flex buildings on it under existing zoning, and that zoning would be in place for about 8 years. So irrespective of what town meeting does, that is frozen, and you can proceed. From a legal standpoint, I do believe if you spin off a lot, if you were to subdivide the lot into 1 or more parcels, those parcels that are not included in the MBTA community zoning are free to do what you want with, including restrictions, open space, any number of things. There are advantages for the property owner, such as if you limit the development, there may be some tax advantages because they're developable lots and you're essentially donating to the community, and there are some tax advantages to doing that. There are a number of strategies that can be employed, but the time to talk about them is now when you're making fundamental decisions. Jim, your comment, poster child. I mean, I've done about 3 transit-oriented developments. I think 1 in Ashland, Westboro, and we've done the Woburn Mall. I can't imagine being right next to the rail station where you could say 200 steps and you're in, does this go to North Station, this line?
Yes.
Yeah, 200 steps, you're in North Station.
Porter Square.
Oh, right. So from a planning perspective, it seems to touch all the bases. And you could put the density up by the train station and utilize the open space and the wetlands for amenities, and some of the other land, who knows what the options are. But now's the time to discuss them.
So are you trying to tell us that you're representing the owner of the property, that they would be definitely interested in subdividing the land?
I think we'd be willing to work with the town to explore that. At least my expression was that they spent, I think the comment to me was they spent 5 or 6 years working with the town to try to come up with a workable solution. And I don't think they've changed their attitude with respect to working with the town. I think they have a lot of history with the town. And the opportunity to do it now, I think is tremendous. I mean, I actually think that if you do rezone other parcels and you go to the state to get state approval, I think on the black letter law, you're within a half mile of the train station, et cetera, they would probably approve it. But I think you get a lot of raised eyebrows saying, well, what do you mean? You had an opportunity to do it right next to the station and you went away from the station? That's only going to add traffic, because I can envision some of the projects I've done, 15 to 20% of the people living there just walk and get on the train. Doesn't sound like a big number, but that is a really big number from a planning perspective. So, you know, I'm only here this evening to say, look, we wanted you to know what we're doing, so it wouldn't be any surprise when we come in with a preliminary subdivision. That's to preserve the client's rights. But there is an opportunity here to work with the town as this is morphing into a policy and doing something that is, you know, responsive to what the state is trying to do, utilizes the asset you have, which is the train station. And I would submit it would reduce traffic dramatically, because people, once they're there, are not going to be leaving the site to get there. If you do it on the other side, you're leaving that site to park there and take the train. So,
Could you go over this preliminary, or this?
yeah, this essentially divides the existing parcel into 4 lots, and the building layouts, again, subject to verifying, test borings and all the things you would do prior to development, shows that it is conceivable that you could do the project that is shown here. We'd add a new road, which is the cul-de-sac that goes up with the off of Foster Street, and you're creating new lots off of that subdivision road, and then siting one smaller building, I think it's approximately 15,000 square feet down on Foster Street, and 3 buildings further back in the site. And that is compliant with zoning today, which we would be freezing. So this would be possible, again, subject to, wetlands, test borings, all the things that you do in construction. This would be possible. And frankly, it would require less, septic, et cetera, because the use would be less intense.
And what are you envisioning there then? Or what is your client envisioning?
The hot item in the marketplace right now is what they call industrial flex buildings. If you've been following the financial press, a lot of companies life sciences have moved out of downtown Cambridge and Boston, and they're looking, the lab space has already been pretty much staked out. But what they're looking for now is places where you can store, distribute, and perhaps even, process a product. We don't have tenants at this point.
Right.
This is being done as a preemptive, let's just stop the carousel, so to speak, and show what we can do and preserve our rights.
How many square feet are we talking?
The 3 buildings out back are 49 each, so there's 150,000 plus probably 165,000 roughly.
And approximately how many parking spaces?
Oh, I haven't laid that out. It's on plan.
Was it in there? Oh,
There's approximately, probably about 200 spaces.
okay, 200 spaces, okay.
6 loading docks
Yeah.
each.
Yeah, each building.
So pretty substantial,
Yeah.
in other words.
No,
Does the board have any questions for?
But again, I just wanted to reiterate that, and I've spoken to the town and the consultant, that, we could sit down and see if something could be worked out, because you can split the lot
Can
off.
I'm sorry, can you explain what you meant when you said that you would freeze it for 8 years, or?
Under Massachusetts law, if you file a preliminary subdivision at any time prior to the adoption of a zoning change, and filed it right up to the date of town meeting. And then you follow that preliminary, which is basically a plan like this, a preliminary plan. And then within 7 months of the date of the filing of a preliminary, you file a definitive plan, which is a much more engineered plan. You get an 8-year zoning freeze. And the purpose of the public policy behind that is that towns couldn't say, we don't like that project, we're gonna go in and rezone it.
Okay.
So it gives the developer the comfort that for 8 years, that you've frozen the zoning. And if anyone appeals it during that appeal period, it stayed, so it gets tacked on. So it's a preemptive way of, people have made investments in land and they have certain property rights. It's preserving the property rights.
Sure.
But that doesn't mean, as I said, I want to reiterate strongly that the property owner is more than willing, as the last 5 or 6 years have indicated, to work something out.
Okay.
And again, speaking for myself, not my client right now, to have something right next to a train station is the ideal from a planning standpoint. So.
Any questions for him, or we?
So I don't have to speak at 7:45. You've heard it all.
So I just wanted to say thank you, and I wanted to make sure that it's clear that if this was to be considered, I think that there are a few other items for the preliminary application that are necessary.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have the draft development impact statement.
No, I'm not filing a preliminary plan. This was just to show you what we're going to do. We have up until town meeting to file, well along the way of doing the application. We haven't filed it yet. We don't have to file it yet.
This is an informal discussion.
This is just,
So
we
it's an
wanted to let you know what our
informal
thought process was to allow you to
Okay.
factor into your decision
Okay.
making.
I wanted to make sure that this
Yeah.
was the
No, this is not a
preliminary plan
preliminary.
that you were submitting.
This is
Okay.
not a preliminary plan.
So,
Okay.
getting back to the end, are you done? Sorry.
So I think one of the questions that I have from a plan like this, anytime the discussion turns to having industrial at that particular space, is how would it work given the railroad crossing right there?
We're not crossing it. We're not interfering with it.
No. Let me finish my question. So if you've got trucks, because if this is an industrial
Mhm.
building, there's
Yep.
a ton of loading bays here. If you've got all of these semi-trucks that are coming down Foster Street, and there's a train coming, and there's a backup for whatever reason, traffic safety is clearly one of those important things that has to be considered in this. So for any future discussion, if you could please consider that and
When we have a project, absolutely, and traffic safety and the CSX and the rail lines actually have very detailed crossing guidelines, and I'm sure that they would enforce it. I would just like to add one thing. We are preparing a preliminary application, and it's meaningless if you deny a preliminary. That doesn't stop the process. You could vote it down, as long as the critical element is the definitive within 7 months. And if you deny the definitive, while that's being appealed, the freeze stays in place, and you can still vote, still act under the current zoning. And we're not using that as a lever. We're just saying we're trying to protect our rights to have a discussion.
Exactly what you're doing.
No, I respect, as a business person, they have waited 6 years and, they're business people. So
But they
I
also,
think we have to be respectful of them.
they are also very committed to the town.
Yes.
I mean, I have had clients that would say, it's irrelevant what the town wants, this is what we're gonna do. But my mandate was to make sure that the town understood that we're doing this to preserve their rights, but they want to maintain a dialogue. And there are some creative things we could do.
Well, I appreciate their willingness to continue discussions.
So, last but not least, we need to vote and send something to move forward. Are you in favor, what parcel?
I'm in favor of the one right next to the train station. As Jeff said, it's a poster child. I mean, if we're looking to reduce carbon emissions and, and provide affordable housing for people, that's the perfect place.
Mr. Chair.
And I also assuming that we can get conservation land. I mean, that becomes then an amenity, not just for the people who live there, but the people who live on Foster Street. I mean, for all Littleton residents. So I think that's a nice amenity.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say there might be comments from the public as well for this.
We're running late, and we have to make a
I
decision
think it's
where we...
important that we hear what the public have to say about
We've
this.
been here for 6 years, Anna, looking at this. It's,
I'm kind of in agreement with Anna. Let's,
okay, does anyone else have another question or concern? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Deborah Jacobs, I live at 234 Foster, and I do not like, for obvious reasons, the idea of the yellow parcel, us going ahead with the yellow parcel. I would be in favor of the red one, if I understand the map correctly. And so do we get a vote here, or is the board making a decision?
do you understand what would go in? Do you understand that the yellow parcel will be developed?
Yeah,
Oh, okay, all right.
With
Just wanted to
industrial
make sure.
buildings,
yeah,
Okay,
with 200 cars,
yeah.
which is probably less than it would be with housing. I mean, which is probably
And
more
no
than would be with
conservation
housing.
land. I just want to make sure everybody understands here.
It's the proximity to where I live that bothers me. And as somebody else has noted, the traffic on Foster Street is pretty bad already. We already have that huge development behind us, with 35 houses. And,
Did you see how far back the housing would be from Foster Street?
well, I may not have comprehended that completely, but
It would be much further back than the commercial buildings.
It's 20 acres of open space behind your house. If you live on Foster Street, there's 20 acres of open space between you and the housing. If you saw how they cut it up across.
okay, well, I merely want to register my opinion.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Alex Gallo, I live at 15 Grimes, across from the train station. And I'm also in favor of the red parcel because I do feel like traffic to Taylor, which would provide direct access to Route 2 instead of only on Foster, would help ease the burden there. And I appreciate you guys have been out at it for a long time, but we're new residents to Littleton, so thank you for giving us an opportunity to say something.
Can I just ask you a question? You go to the Point. Have you ever shopped at the
Yes,
Point?
I work there.
How do you get there? You go down Foster Street.
I go down Foster Street.
Okay, so what's the difference? 500 feet is, people are not going to go out Taylor Street, they're going to go down Foster Street. Before your housing came in, the sky was falling because we were going to approve 75 houses on Foster Street, and the traffic was going to be horrendous, people weren't able to get up. Doesn't happen that way because this is residential. The traffic, if you put industrial in there, is going to be terrible. And that's what we're trying to, you don't have a problem getting on Grimes going to the Point. You're not going to have a problem.
Well, I have a problem because the road is
Oh, yes,
horrible.
the road's going to be fixed.
But my husband takes Route 2 to the Point, and it takes the same amount of time. And I do feel like if you put housing on with a direct access to Taylor, you'd have a lot of residents who wouldn't really take the train, but would need access to Route 2 or 495. So,
And you'd be willing to give up like 20 acres of conservation land? Because people are always telling us, we want more.
I don't want to, I'm not trying to argue, I'm just
No, so
stating.
that's what we're trying to get feedback, is because we're constantly being told we need more open space, so I'm just trying
I'm
to
okay
get
with a developing town, like I'm a new resident, so I'm not, I understand, like I live next to an Amazon warehouse building, and I have people walking down the street in all black outfits at 1 a.m. that I've almost hit multiple times because there's no sidewalk. So I don't have I appreciate that yellow area would be zoned for industrial. I don't know what that's gonna look like. I can't see into the future. I just know that as someone who lived in apartments for 12 plus years and just got a house, there's a lot of cars, there's a lot of traffic. Residents are going multiple different places. Not every single person who lives there is gonna take the train. That's just my opinion. We live in a car culture, so I feel like a lot of people are gonna be there for access to Route 2 as well. And having both of those access points, one on Foster and one on Taylor, would help reduce the pressure just on one area.
The other issue is, if that is developed, it's going to be for sale. The thought is for sale units, not for rent units, so there would be people who can't afford to live in Grimes Lane and spend $1 million on a 4-bedroom house. It's going to also, help with the burden of first-time home buyers, senior housing. That's kind of why we're looking, if we
I
don't-
get it. It took me 4 years to save enough money to live in this town. So I understand that it's not affordable for most people. We were very lucky to get in.
And yes, sir.
Joe Gallo, 15 Grimes. I think the biggest deciding factor for us is what's the traffic impact on the road. A gentleman brought up earlier, said it's not for discussion today. However, to us, that's the most important thing. Because like you said, these units are coming. It's just a matter of picking green, yellow, or red to us. We don't want the additional traffic. So when are we going to discuss the traffic impacts on Foster?
We won't know until it's developed. The issue, but let me ask, and as I keep asking everyone else, most people do not go down Taylor, who's lived in Littleton forever, don't go down Taylor Street to go to the Common. They go down Foster Street. You all moved into a subdivision that when it was proposed, there was a lot of debate about 75 houses going on Foster Street. It's going to be a nightmare. It's going to be gridlock. We approved it, and we were proven right. The traffic is not going to destroy the neighborhood or anything else. It works because it's residential. If you put a commercial component down there, like an Amazon, that's an entirely different animal than 150 people living. A lot of people, we're going to have Crosstown Connect. We're going to have the ability that you can go all through the city of Littleton, town of Littleton, without having to have a car. People may buy over there, the seniors, if we get senior housing there, we'll be able to live there without the possibility of having a car. First-time home buyers may work in Boston and don't need a car to go to the train station to go there.
But your question is reasonable. Traffic studies aren't at issue until there's a specific project proposed.
Yes.
This is just zoning.
I get it.
And so we can't predict. My impression is the traffic will be much worse with an industrial property than with residential. But that's my impression. I don't know. And it's funny that you two split on going to the point, because we had this discussion before the meeting. And I said, well, I would, like, I live in the Common, I would drive 495 to Westford. And they're, oh, no, I wouldn't do that. And, everyone has different things. But, so that's why we did permit the Amazon last mile delivery on the other side of, on the other side of the interchange. And they did a lot of, at that point, they did a lot of very detailed traffic studies. And that's what we would be looking for with any development proposal.
My comment is more around to make an educated, informed decision, it'd be nice to know that. That's all. But I get that you guys do that last, which for us
No,
is useful.
it's, how can you be educated when you don't know what the proposal is going to be?
Well, but I
That's what we're
understand what
here
he's
for.
saying. We're talking about industrial versus residential.
Yeah.
I mean, if industrial, let's say it's got 217 parking spaces, that's 217 cars twice a day, right? Versus 150 residences,
Some of whom might be taking the train.
or not going out that day.
No, I mean, our educated
I
guess
mean-
at this point would be there would be less traffic with a residential development than with an industrial development.
Yeah, do you have?
Yeah, I saw your hand up first, I just want to speak to this one thing. One of the things that factors into the math that we have not talked about as part of this is the number of parking spaces. And so depending on whether or not you're requiring 1 space per unit, 2 spaces per unit, bedroom, et cetera, that's also going to affect the number of cars. It will also affect the model. It's one of the things that as we write the zoning will actually change the model. The other thing is, you mentioned, I think, industrial traffic versus residential traffic. Just to note, and I'm sure everybody's already thought of this, but if you're zoning one of the red parcels as housing and the industrial zone that exists currently on the yellow parcel is developed, you may be looking at residential and industrial traffic in that area. So just to put that out there. Sorry, Patty.
Two more quick questions, then we're gonna.
Mark Rambacher, I'm also on the select board, but question, if this is commercial, can't you restrict which way the traffic goes out, just like you do at the Amazon, so that it always has to go towards Taylor Street?
You can try from tractor trailers, sure.
So if we're doing that, then there's could potentially less impact on the residents.
I don't see that, Mark.
On
I
Foster
see that their concern is coming out of Grimes Lane and making a left or a right. And you would, I don't know exactly where the you know, how it works out, but whatever traffic comes out of that site would impact that entry and exit from Grimes Lane.
Also, as far as the senior and the affordable housing and whatever you're building the same type of things on any of those parcels. So to say that the yellow versus the red versus the green have any impact on affordability is, they should all be equivalent. It's just the number of units you're going to get, right? So,
Yes, sir.
So, Anthony Rosillo, 290 Foster Street, and I actually live by that red parcel, and I've walked to the train station many times. It's not a bad walk. I kind of don't favor that parcel because I think the other one's closer, and if I lived that much closer, I wouldn't need a car at all if I were just going into Boston. It's just more convenient from the yellow parcel, I think, but.
Yeah.
Jane Rossetti, 8 Valley Drive. I have a question about the whole state process, the MBTA thing. Are there other towns that don't have town sewer? Because it seems like this is a unique situation.
No, not at all unique. Unique that we have such a large undeveloped parcel immediately adjacent to our commuter rail station. There are, 3, I think, communities that are in a similar situation. But no, not unique with not having sewer at this parcel.
Because that density doesn't take into account sewer. Yeah.
But we can't ask the state for sewer money until we have a proposal that's approved. Then we can go to the state and say, hey, you want to give us $9 million so we can take this, as Mr. Sanders talked about, and tie it into the existing sewer. We will try, obviously, the select board will try to get money out of the state if and when we get this, something approved down there, because it makes perfect sense to do
Would you
that.
talk to the other towns and see if you can have a united front?
Each community must comply.
So one thing you bring up, though, is that we will zone a parcel, and that doesn't necessarily mean that any given development proposal for 150 units will be able to be built. There are issues of topography. There are issues of, there'd have to be a package septic plan. You know, so there are many factors that might actually reduce the number of units that are built. So we're just dealing with lines on a paper. The actual proposal might be limited, and we're just trying to limit, we want to do the minimum amount on the minimum parcel. And I would also like to say, just to everyone here, we're in a pretty interesting position that we had previously zoned King Street Common. Otherwise, we would be talking about 750 units in this area.
So we're actually pretty lucky from the state.
We're very lucky.
I would like to hold the
Can I ask
board.
a question, Chair? Mr. Chair? I think I already know the answer, but could we ever bring 2 parcels to town meeting and let the residents vote on which parcel? I don't think we can. Okay.
Planning board, part of the planning board job is to make a recommendation
Yeah,
to town
okay.
meeting based on.
Based on the people who attend, okay.
Well, no, based on your work with the consultants and your planning experience.
Right, and public opinion, yeah, okay,
So
public input.
I would like to let them have an idea where I think the board stands. So I'd like to poll the board to see which parcel, A, B, or C, they would like to.
I would term it as a subdivided C.
I mean,
the yellow.
Subdivided yellow.
Subdivided yellow.
Okay, I'll call it that, subdivided yellow. You're in favor, are you in favor, Violet?
Absolutely in favor of the subdivided yellow. If we choose the red parcel, we're going to get housing there, which is going to have traffic, and we're also going to get the industrial on the yellow. And I think putting the housing on the yellow parcel is better than having both.
I like subdivided, I like the way you put it, subdivided yellow. I'm in favor of that as well. And Lisa?
Yes, I am as well.
Anna?
I'm still going to hold firm on preferring the red
Okay.
west.
So could we proceed forward with the subdivided yellow?
Absolutely.
Can we, how do you propose that you work with your client in exploring the way we can
If the
subsidize
chair of
this?
the board allows me to talk to your consultant directly, we have a lot of experience, and we'll give some ideas, and you can choose to accept them or not.
I think that would be great if you, if the two of you together. So when we come back in early August, we'll have a better idea.
Early August.
It'll take a little bit longer than that, but,
When's our next meeting, right?
In 2 weeks.
You don't think we'll have at least a rough idea of what
They've got all the
understanding?
work to do.
Understanding?
it's a lot of writing and negotiation.
Okay.
We'll have some discussion.
Thank you. Thank you all, by the way.
Thank you.
All right, we're running. What?
My free to leave?
You can, yeah, you. We have a 5:15, 7:15, King Street Commons, preliminary subdivision for 550 King Street. I'm sorry we're a little late, but this was important. Thank you all for coming, by the way.
Yeah, but we remember we already listened
I know.
to 7:45.
So we're actually not too far behind.
Yeah, but some of us were since 5, so.
Well, yeah. You got to eat.
Good to go. Perfect. Yep. Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Rick Frybird from TEC, long time no see. So I'm here tonight to talk about the preliminary subdivision plan for 550 King Street. So the purpose of this plan is to subdivide the parcel into a number of lots. I think there's in excess of 20 of them, plus or minus. There's a lot.
It's counting.
I know. But I thought it was important to explain why. So during the master plan process, you might remember that we talked about subdividing the property. We talked about, really no limitations in terms of interior lot lines. We really focused on the perimeter, protecting the zoning around the perimeter. But we described the fact that we would need to subdivide the property to provide a financial instrument to construct the project in phases over time. If we're doing the project all in one phase, all in one bang, then we wouldn't really have any need to subdivide the property at all. But the way that lenders look at sites, right, is that when you're borrowing money, they seek collateral. And so if you don't subdivide the property, the entirety of the property is the collateral that they take with the first phase, right? So you seek to borrow some money to build the first building, you bring a down payment, right? They call that equity. And then they loan you the rest. And what they take from you in exchange for the loan is equity in the property. You can't then go back to build phase 2 and offer the same equity. They said, well, we're already going to take the property if you don't pay on phase 1, right? So by subdividing the property, what it allows you to do is to subdivide the equity of each parcel to support the development of each parcel over time. So what we've shown here on this plan in blue is the proposed roadway. It's exactly how you saw it on the previous plan, which is the boulevard-style road that comes in from Great Road with connections down to King Street. Shows the proximity of the existing IBM buildings to that way. I'm going to describe that blue area as a way for right now. Our intention is to keep it, it's going to be privately owned. And if the project is successful in getting some public infrastructure money from the state to help build the roads and facilitate the construction of the roads, then it'll be a permanent public easement that gets placed over private property, but the maintenance will always stay with the landowner. But to secure public financing or public grant money, it's a requirement that the public has permanent interest in the property, and that would be granted through the form of a permanent public easement. Will be how that mechanism will work. So what the purpose of this plan is really just to show the division of lots, to demonstrate that each of the lots complies with zoning for what a lot is. And in our case, it's really two things that govern that. It's how much frontage you have. If you have at least 100 feet of frontage, and then the lot size. And all of these lots meet those two requirements. This is a two-step process. So this is sort of like, it's the preliminary filing. It's informal. Technically, you're allowed to do this on scratch paper, more or less. It's basically just kind of talk through where the access comes from, demonstrate that the lots meet the dimensional requirements. The second step is to come back with a definitive plan, and that would have the meets and bounds, to be stamped by a surveyor. That gets recorded. That's like when the lots become real legal lots. And our thought is that we'd be back in front of you probably in September to go over that plan. That plan would also include detail about the design of the roadway, So you'd see the curb on that plan, you'd see landscaping, sidewalks, that sort of stuff. And you'd see the drainage that supports the roadway. It's important, I think, to say that this subdivision, including the next version of it, the definitive plan, doesn't propose any buildings yet. We're still waiting to bring forward to you the Phase 1 site plan, which is a totally separate process from the subdivision process. So we're not seeking approval for any buildings, no new development, no parking modifications, just lines on paper to separate the properties and make sure that we can develop the property in phases as was intended. Thank you.
Thank you. So just to kind of reiterate, when we did the point came in as one big plan, and then same thing for financing. I think, am I correct, we had 8 or 9 different parcels for the exact same reason. As we all know, Market Basket bought one of the parcels. We don't know if you're gonna buy them, sell them, but the owner of the point, the developer of the point, came in for the exact same reasons. In order to get financing, you have to break it up into little pieces so that you get $10 million for this little piece, you finish that, and then you get the next, whatever the numbers. And that's how we did it there. It's worked out very well. It's not uncommon to do it. The question that was brought up was about the other issue is going to be the betterments on each little parcel, and it's going to take a while for the town to figure out with the sewer what that's going to be. We're not sure that'll be done by September, but if you're coming in with the definitive in September, hopefully you'll be further enough along with the betterment process. That piece of the puzzle will be close to being answered as well.
Yeah, and I think that might be something conceptually maybe we could talk about right now, which is that, so the Lupoli Companies, as the master developer, has entered into a sewer reservation agreement with the town and LELWD. That agreement is specifically to Lupoli Companies. In fact, if you're going to transfer it to anybody else, it has to be approved separately under a separate agreement. Our proposal, as it relates to the subdivision, is to retain all of the gallonage rights with the Lupoli Companies, and that each of the entities of the parcels will be an umbrella entity of Lupoli. So if it's okay with the town, our proposal would be to not modify based on lots, but to retain it based on the property bounds of existing 550 King Street. So the modification to the sewer agreement might just be that we need an addendum to spell out that the property previously labeled as 550 King Street with the map and lot, whatever it is, map 8, lot, whatever it is now these 20 lots, and just spell out those. And how we've always described the process with WD is it's basically, okay, we've been granted a capacity of 150,000 gallons a day, and that each phase of the project would draw down against that. And we propose to keep that exactly as it was, described during that negotiation process.
Okay, well, we'll need an understanding between you and the light and water and the sewer, the sewer people,
Yep.
that's how it's going to go when you come before us with the definitive in September.
Makes sense. Yep.
So, Mr. Chair, you were talking about the process that happened at the point. So after the breakup of the parcels, then what was the process after that?
So after the breakup of the parcels was purely from a financial standpoint, that we got a phasing plan from the point, and they started, basically, Market Basket was, I believe, the first one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they started with that one, Phase 1. They finished Phase 1, then they moved to Phase 2, then they finished Phase 2, and they moved to Phase 3. And I think what they did was they did all the infrastructure first, and then the buildings came in, if I'm remembering correctly. I think that's how they did it. They did all the infrastructure, which makes the most sense, and then the buildings came. So it was a phase process. They came before us, every single phase, they came before us with a definitive plan for that to make sure the buildings were as they were proposed.
Right, I wouldn't use the word definitive
Well,
because it's
site plan.
subdivision,
It's not,
but it was a site plan.
A site plan
each-
for it.
each of the-
And then we also changed our bylaw so that we could have 0 lot lines. So they could the lot lines could touch each other, the buildings could actually touch each other as well. So we did that there, and it's also part of your permit as well. So they came in phases, which is what's proposed here, and we did 1 phase at a time, or 1 or 2 phases, however it was. Moved on from that, went to the next. It doesn't affect how it's built, it just affects the funding of how it's done, and the fact that they come in little bits. It's easier for us. We'll get a traffic study, which will show us the whole property. We'll get a drainage study, which will show us the whole property. We'll get,
Will that traffic study come at the very beginning?
it has to.
Yeah, so as part of the special permit with the master plan, we need to provide the study not less than 90 days before the submission of the Phase 1 site plan.
It has to be the first.
So,
one
so
of the
prior to the
things we
first
see.
building being submitted to the planning board for site plan review, the entire traffic study has to be submitted to the planning board.
So then, after that, then we build off, it's like building blocks, we do this one, go to the next, so.
Yeah, and that process, that site plan review process for each phase, that's also already outlined in the special permit, so it's exactly the same as what we talked about before. This is just banks.
Yep, we wanted to make sure that the audience as well
Yeah.
understood the process, so thank
We're
you.
not changing anything, we're just,
So would your intention be to build, I mean, you wouldn't build all of the roads?
No, so, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So on our definitive plan, I think what we're gonna do is show you phased
Okay.
road build out as well. I think Phase 1, just to kind of preview probably what you're gonna see, is it'll be the blue area doing that roadway that goes from Great Road and then makes that first turn to the right towards King Street.
Yeah.
I think that'll be the first thing that you see. The second thing will probably be the leg that goes to the north.
And there's nothing in the subdivision that will preclude you from definitively developing the plan as you've shown us?
That's right.
are you going to include, and this is really not germane to this, but I'm just going to ask it anyway, so so everyone can hear. Are you going to include the mill building as part of a phase of this, or is that going to still say as a separate entity?
So it's a separate entity. We view it like internally. How we talk about it is it is a phase of this. It's immediately proximate to the project. So we view it as a phase of the greater project.
Okay.
The branding, the consistency, the way the two sites tie together is important to us. It creates more value if you look at it together than it does if they're sort of two totally separate things. So internally, we talk about it as a phase of this project, but it is a separate site across the street.
Right,
Yeah.
it's permitted differently. I just wanted to know if we're going to see it as we.
We might have called it like
progress
Great
through.
Road Crossing or something like that if we had known earlier, but.
Anyone else have any questions before I open it up to the public?
Do you have any idea of when the mill building would take place in the phasing of this?
I would just be guessing.
Okay.
If you made me guess, I would say probably like phase 3 or 4
Okay.
of the project, but that's a real guess.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, in terms of being able to take a look at the proposed, not the proposed, but the expected revenue that is going to come to the town, I think that that's really important, something that the residents would very much like to understand. And so I know that we have that we have those numbers from you all, and it would be really great if the town's finance folks could kind of vet those and make sure that they are actually going to be something that we can plan on. So I hope the Lipoli companies would be amenable to talking about any assumptions or anything like that
Sure,
that
absolutely.
they might need information on.
Yeah, it's important. I mean, that was one of the key topics that we talked about at the onset of the zoning was the tax deficit that IBM vacating the site left the town in the financial position that it would be in. And an important part of this project's redevelopment was backfilling and then some, hopefully, that tax gap. So
Okay.
I think that's important to share.
Okay. And then, so I know that we talked about the betterment, that's a process that's underway right now. Is there anything else, and I suppose through the chair, this is a question for Chair Wilson and you, is there anything else, is there any other MOU or anything else that is out there in play that could, hinder our moving forward? I remember there was an MOU that had been discussed back on June 9th, and I didn't know where we stood with that.
Is it okay if I speak? It's okay if I, yeah. Okay, yeah. So there's a draft MOU that exists between the town and the Lipoli companies. That draft MOU is specific to the sewer agreement. So not to get into all the numbers, but the sewer project turned out to be very expensive, more expensive than anybody in the town thought it would be at the onset. And that obviously created a hardship for everybody, the town, us, everybody, right? Costs have gone up a lot in the last couple of years on infrastructure work. And the sewer project was no exception to that. It got very expensive. So there's an MOU that exists, a draft MOU that exists between the town and Lipoli, and that really revolves around grant money and how to use the grant money to accomplish a couple things at once. Separately, though, I predict that the Lipoli companies will be in front of the select board to talk about project economics as an entirety, as it relates to the significant increase in cost of the sewer system, of which Lipoli bears about 62% of the entire cost. So it's they're big numbers to overcome. But we're in this together, we're gonna figure this out together, so.
Great, I really like that attitude.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone in the audience have any? Oh, Mr. Sanders. Go. I know you were going to talk. I know.
Mr. Chairman, George Sanders, 672 Great Wood. I have two questions. One, that I want the resident to know, and we have the town assessor here, which I went to her and asked her about this property since it's bought, because residents are still paying the lost revenue on that property. And my understanding from the assessor, when that property valuation gets over $60 million, then we resident will stop paying the taxes to the town to make up the difference on what IBM was paying. Now, she's here, that's what I was told. So I think the people need to understand that even though that's being developed, you know, they're not paying the taxes that they need. We're still paying the taxes of the makeup of the amount of money that the town is entitled to. That's one. Two, I want to know if you're going to put the housing in as your first project, which seemed to be the smart thing. You get enough units there, and you start collecting money there, and then the bank will see, okay, you're able to meet your debt, and they'll give you the loan to the next. So I'm concerned that housing is one of the things that we have great concern for here in town of Littleton, and you're going to put in this unit. Now, I heard the lady mention earlier about 812, but my understanding was that you're going to put 780 in there, or what is that number? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
I can respond. Yeah, so we have a commitment through the master plan process. We talked about phasing at one of the meetings, George, and so the first phase we estimate will be housing. The only caveat would be that the planning board granted us a flexibility if we found a tenant for the existing IBM buildings. That may go first, but our first new construction is proposed to be multifamily housing. But we can't build it all at once. We have to alternate in phases. We can do multifamily housing, then we got to come to the front and build the green space. Then we can go back and do multifamily, then come to the front and do retail. So it makes sure that the town doesn't end up with just the housing, but none of the amenity space that the town wanted along the frontage. As it relates to the 812 units versus 780, so we're proposing 780 units on the site. The 812 is math based on 20 units per acre. So because she did the zoning analysis on the site, I think the site is a little bit in excess of 41 acres, plus or minus thereabouts. So I think that's where the 812, our special permit with the planning board is for 780.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Michael Field, 95 Manawaki. So as a commercial landowner in the center of town, you say you're looking at a portion of the 150,000 gallons a day. Do you have any idea what that is per, the percentage, is that the percentage, like how much is that percentage of the total use of the new sewer system that's going to be installed in Littleton?
Sure, yeah, so the rough numbers is, I only know because we pay, it's the same percentage as the bill. So I believe that we're 62% user of the entire system, which is why we bear 62% of the cost of the system itself. So I think the system, and its initial permit from DEP is around 210,000 gallons in total.
Mm-hmm. So, and you can divide that by the number of gallons per.
Yeah, so 150,000 gallons divided by 210 plus or minus.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyone else?
Is that what is projected throughout the town for the betterment fee? Is that what they're gonna, is that what the water department's gonna say, okay, that's the betterment fee per gallon, if you divided it?
That's right, yeah.
Roughly?
Yeah, so I probably shouldn't speak on behalf of LELWD, so
I'm
take this as only somebody.
As a commercial land, and so if
Yeah, so as somebody who went through the process, like you would go through the process.
Yes.
Sorry, is it okay if I do?
Go ahead.
Yeah. As somebody who went through the process that you would have to go through, the process is that you write a letter to LELWD and you request capacity.
Your capacity?
Yep. So you work with whoever, and they would tell you, okay, I want to do X, Y, and Z on my property. They'd say, okay, you should go talk to LEWD about X number of gallons. You write them a letter, the Board of Water and Sewer Commissioners has a vote to issue the gallonage. When they do, you begin the process of entering into a sewer reservation agreement, and that outlines the costs and terms of your agreement. You know, we'll give you X amount of gallons for Y amount of money, basically.
Okay.
And they break it into something called RTUs.
REUs.
REUs, thank you. Yeah. REUs is how they kind of break it down. But so what you ask for, you'll get back in a slightly different format that adds up to the same gallonage.
Okay.
Yes, John?
Just kind of in the same vein, it's important for people to understand that you've talked about it being a phased approach, and if, you know, if the IBM building comes online and then the first residential building is built, I would venture to say that you're not going to use 150,000 gallons a day.
No, correct. Yeah.
So the whole thing's phased, including the
Including the gallonage. That's exactly right. Yep. I should have said that. Yep. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, so you're gonna come back with some more answers and hopefully a definitive sometime in September?
Yep, and we'll also come back with a memo about the sewer to describe how we see, and we'll make sure that we have something back from LAWD that either agrees or disagrees with our proposal.
So I think you need to come back with leave here with an idea. Does anyone have any problem with what we're proposing?
I'm happy to have you before so we can ask you just generalized questions about the project.
Okay, thank you. Bartlett, do you have any questions or concerns? No. Anna?
I don't have any concerns, but I did have another final question. So if we're accepting this as a preliminary, we are also supposed to be asking for input from fire, water, highway, conscom, et cetera. So have we received any comments from them?
No, the submittal came in very close to this first meeting, so.
Okay.
Everything will go on.
I know, I know we did this project a little bit backwards where we came to you for the special permit first. So I think we probably got a lot of that feedback early, but hopefully by the definitive, we'll have heard if there's any feedback, we can roll it into the definitive details.
Great, thank you.
Lisa, you have any questions or concerns?
Yeah. Have you found anybody for the IBMs? Do you have any interested?
Interest, yes.
Okay.
Yes, interest, yes. We don't have any signed agreements or anything like that yet, but interest, yes.
Okay.
And I think just talking about like the partnership with the town and working this all out, I think I said we're in this together, we'll figure this out together, but you know, the sewer project's been started now, which is a tremendous deal for something like this. It's very hard for a tenant to commit to something that they don't quite see yet. You know, oh, we're going to build the sewer. It's just a few years away. Well, now that
They've been talking about it for 12 years or 20 years, but
but now it's real. They've started construction. People can start to see things taking shape. There's a special plan, a special permit approval for the site. So the closer you get towards that, the more it picks up, and we are seeing that increased interest.
Right.
So fingers crossed.
Okay.
Cool. Anyone else? Last questions? No? All right, well, you have your work cut out for you. We'll see you in September.
See you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Where are we now? Okay, we got rid of 7:45, 8 o'clock. Sorry, we're a little late. Bond release request for Dean Lane.
Yes. There is, just to be clear, there is no bond on Dean Lane. The bond is for the road that's been accepted on the Cooper Farm 2 years ago, roughly. Lauren had an email sent to her, 2 emails sent to her over the last week to reiterate that. And if she has to read them to you, she will, because of the tri-party agreement that has clearly
depicts the use of it.
The tri-party agreement has nothing to do with Dean Lane. So if there's any misunderstanding, Maureen can read it out to you right now.
The board has access to all the information. It's been posted on the website.
Has everybody listened to it or read it or understanded it?
So
I'll take it. Thank you. I perfectly understand that it's 40,000, correct?
It's a surety bond, tri-party agreement between
40,000.
the town.
And it clearly states that it's for the roadway. I don't have any problem with the fact that you've come before us. We're assuming all the work has been done, it's all been approved, it's a town right of way. I'm okay with that part of it.
Yep.
See how the rest of the board feels. I mean, it's the 40,000, it's purely for the roadway, okay? It's up to the board, want to talk specifically about that or anything else?
Can we ask if there are residents here that?
Are there any residents who live there? Yes.
Both of us are so new.
Okay.
Just 2 months, on the Dean Lane. So I don't think I have any idea about what's happening. So I just came to.
So I'll give you, so there's money left over from the developers to be released, okay? The developers are telling us it has nothing to do with Dean Lane itself, that it was put on, the tri-party agreement was just for the roadway on Cooper Farms. I don't think the whole board agrees with that concept, but we're talking about the roadway. So if we're only talking about Dean Lane, we want to make sure, as residents of Dean Lane, don't have any problems with how Dean Lane is, because Dean Lane eventually, is a private way. If you have any questions and concerns, you should voice them now while we still have money set aside. If we're talking just about the roadway, that's all we're talking about. So that's why it's nice that you came. Are you happy with Dean Lane? Is everything all right with
Dean
Dean?
Lane has nothing to do with the surety bond.
You can say that all you want.
It says it
right in the
clearly
I'm
states
just,
it.
it's part of the roadway structure. I'm just
It's
asking.
not part of the roadway structure.
Okay.
It says it. If you read it out loud, Maureen.
No,
Please read
I'm
it out
not
loud.
asking Mara to read it out loud. I'm just
I'm
asking.
asking her to read it out loud. Please read it out loud. Please read out the.
Yeah, would you just,
No. It doesn't have anything to do with Dean Lane.
it's up to us to decide if it
No, it
has anything.
doesn't.
Yeah.
Read it. Please read.
No.
I'm
No.
asking.
I'm not,
Who?
I'm in charge.
Okay. I am asking you
I'm saying,
as.
I'm asking the residents who live on Dean Lane if they're happy with Dean Lane. That's all I'm asking him
He
to
doesn't
do.
live on Dean Lane.
He lives on Dean
No,
Lane. He just
doesn't.
said they do.
He lives on the end of Cooper Farm.
No, we both live on
Yeah. Our address is
16 Dean Lane.
They bought the new one.
14 Dean Lane.
Yes, you did.
So we just want to
We
know if
apologize.
they're happy with the road. That's all I'm asking. You don't have to be
It's a private
adversarial
road.
about it.
It
I'm
has
just
nothing to do
asking.
with it.
I'm trying to release the money for the roadway. I'm asking.
What roadway?
Dean Lane and Cooper, they're
No,
all
there
part
is
of it.
no surety bond for Dean Lane.
We were on the
There is
plan.
no surety bond for Dean Lane.
Do you want us to close it and not give it to you? You want me to try to get you your 40,000?
I want you to
Do,
understand
just
that
sit there. Do you have, I'm asking them one simple question. Would you let me ask them? Do you have any problems with Dean Lane as a finished road that you're gonna have to pay for the maintenance of it? I just want to, yes or no, are you happy with it?
I think the road looks fine on
Okay,
Dean Lane.
okay, it works properly, everything's good with Dean Lane, it's good?
I thought the concern was gonna be brought up today, something about the one empty lot on Dean Lane. What is gonna happen to that?
I haven't even got that far yet. I'm trying just to make sure that the paved road works, the drainage works, that people drive up and down it and are happy with it. Are you, sir?
Yeah, it works.
Okay,
And it drains properly?
It drains properly. It doesn't drain at one location, at the end of Dean Lane, and where the field lane and Dean Lane meet.
That's not
Okay.
accurate.
Just Can you repeat what you said?
If I heard
Drainage overall is
No,
fine.
that's not correct.
Right.
But at
Excuse
one-
me, could you let him finish? I'm sorry, sir.
Yeah, so the, where the Dean Lane and the field lane meet, that's where there is a problem with the drainage. It accumulates a little bit at that point.
a little bit, is it, are we talking a little puddle, something like
Yeah, I
that?
mean, for example, in the winter, it's ice.
Okay,
Driveway and around that is ice.
okay.
But otherwise, I don't see
Any issues with it? Okay. All right. So the understanding is that the roadway structures of both Cooper Farms and Dean Lane, whether we are talking about Dean Lane or not, are fine. The other issue is the vacant lot, which she just brought up. I think, in fairness of working with the town and working with the fields, that if they clean up the lot get the I-beams or whatever is left in storage on there.
It's all done.
Done. I
All
mowed
done?
it.
Taken care of, the
Removed
lot, lot looks great, lot's clean.
Mowed it.
Is the lot clean, does it look good?
Maureen can ask Fran if I mowed it yesterday and I removed the...
I'm just asking the people that live there.
Yes, yes.
It looks okay.
Okay.
It's got weeds
It's been
and all,
cleaned.
but it's okay.
So it's not an issue anymore. Okay, we're good.
Ma'am, are you sure? I mean, is there anything, you seem like you want to say something else.
No, I'm new to the neighborhood, so I just, what I had heard was the issue was what is either the town or the field's going to do with the empty lot.
That we're not really addressing. We're
Not
talking,
tonight.
no, we're talking about the final release of the 40,000 that they did a tri-party agreement to build the road, to get the lots released. Whether they think Dean includes it or not, I think we've gotten past that part of it. How does the board feel about releasing the money?
Yes.
Bartlett?
I would like to see what the drainage issue is. I mean, that's what you were talking about earlier, the
Right.
drainage issue. I think a road that has a drainage issue is a problem.
I agree.
Has Green been out there at all to address that one?
Green
All signed off.
signed off on Cooper Farm and the adjacent, what's the other road? That's
Vint.
Vint Lane. Those are where the tri-party agreement were part of. Those have all been signed off by Green International years ago.
Well, what they're trying to say is that wait, can you let me finish? That the water coming off of Cooper Farms down that road that impacts Dean Lane has not been addressed, so
It has.
I'm trying to give you your $40,000. Will you let me
Mark,
try?
it has been addressed, all the catch basins were all cleaned out, everything was done.
So there's no puddling
There's
and
nothing.
There is not a single puddle we had one driveway that had a puddle in it, and last year we fixed it. And it had nothing to do with, anything to do with Cooper Farm or any tri-party agreement. And I literally spent my time and did it, and I addressed it. That was the first house that was built 3 years prior to even having the town accept that road. And it was only...
I'm talking about where Cooper goes into Dean. There's no issue.
There is no issue where the cul-de-sac goes into the Dean Lane. None.
Does
Not a
we have
single-
anything from Green? Have they ever looked at that connection, that intersection right there?
They did.
I just heard the question same time as you did.
What does the board want?
So my concern with any development is that if the residents are left holding the bag and we actually have an opportunity to have existing funds used to repair or make sure that there aren't any issues, and it's incumbent upon us to do that. So I agree with Bartlett that we should at least take a look at it or have Green go back out there and take a look at it. I mean, we've had an abundance of rain, right?
The town has accepted this road 2 years ago. There is no issue with Field Lane that goes down. That's part of the town's. Dean Lane has no issues. You can go down there. Did anybody go down there and look at it? Did anybody, prior to this meeting, go drive around that cul-de-sac?
They're complaining
Not one
about.
person.
They're complaining about in the winter that there's a.
There is not a single puddle.
And they gotta hire a better plow person.
There
Go ahead.
literally is not a single problem with drainage on
Dean Lane, sir. Go
I'm
ahead.
talking about where the Dean Lane and the field lanes meet,
Yep.
right? If you go in front of the 14 field lane,
Which is
that's
14?
right at the circle.
On the low side or the
At the
side?
low side, where the Dean Lane meets.
There's a catch basin right
There's a
before-
catch basin
there's a
on
catch
both
basin
sides of the street.
prior to it going into Dean Lane. There is no water that goes from the cul-de-sac into Dean Lane. Not a drop goes into there.
What I'm trying to say is that when it rains or when there is snow or ice and all these things, right in front of the 14 field lane, their driveway, you see the puddle. You see
It's
the
not-
ice.
That's
That's what I'm
That's
saying.
not true. Because there's a catch basin right in front of it. prior to it going into Dean Lane. It's
telling
actually
me
a
what
double,
I'm-
it's a double catch
You are
basin.
telling me what I'm seeing is not
I
true.
built the road.
All right,
I was
okay,
there.
all right, stop. Mr. Sanders, you have a,
George Sanders, 682 Great Wood. Mr. Chairman, I think the way to solve this is either have the water department.
It's
fire
already been done.
department Go out there and run water and see if it pulls up at that drain.
well, we can have Green do that. We have somebody do that.
They already
Exactly.
approved it, and they already
You know
signed
what?
off on it.
Do you want to give a partial release of the money until, or do you want?
No, because that's part of.
We're requesting all of it to be released.
Mr. Chairman,
No,
I would like
let's
to,
not
please,
release
I would
anything.
like to talk. Mr.
No,
Chairman.
no, we're done. You keep telling us that.
You
No.
don't get to tell us we can't talk in
Please,
our meeting.
Excuse me, I'm the
Right now.
chairman. I'll
I
tell
don't
you.
Of
want
course you're the chairman.
What?
I would like to talk. I would like to you to understand that the bond release does not have a single thing to do with Dean Lane. You have tried to hold us hostage about that.
I'm trying to give you your money. All I'm asking
Then
you.
release it.
Dean Lane has
If
been
there's still a problem with Dean.
There is
no,
not.
Dean Lane
No.
is a private road. The reason you got it is because you bonded the whole property.
No.
Yes.
No, we only
Read
bonded.
the goddamn, read it.
Hey,
Excuse me.
hey,
No. I've spent 2 years.
do not use profanity here, all right?
I want
Do
somebody
not-
to read the tri-party agreement, which it
Clearly
states that it's not part of Dean Lane. I'm not gonna be part of this.
Then fine, then walk out. We're not going to give you
No.
the 40 grand, okay? You happy?
That's not how it's done.
Oh, okay. Sue
So you're
us.
gonna make up rules?
No, I'm not making up
We
rules.
will sue you again.
Okay.
What?
You're 0 for 3. You'll be 0 for 4 in a little bit.
I'm trying to give you some of your money back if
No, we
you.
want all of it
Well,
back.
then-
It's
then-
tied
does-
to our project.
Does the board want to give them all the money? I'll take a vote right now.
What was their,
Please read the tri-party agreement.
well, why didn't you bring it? And
I
We have
We
it.
said
We
it's
provided
right.
it.
it's not through Maren. Bring it yourselves. Hold it in your hand and read it. If you want it to be
Warren,
read.
Please read it. I'm
No,
asking
she
you
is-
as a resident of Littleton to please read, and
Into
you're part of
record.
the planning board.
Jeff,
Please
what do you
read
want
it.
to do?
It's 4 pages.
Well, I would be willing to.
It's not 4 pages. My
I mean,
wife
I,
Will you let him?
sent Lauren a letter explicitly telling her what the tri-party agreement is for.
so, why would there have been a tri-party agreement that excluded Dean Lane?
Because it's a
Because it's a
private
private
road.
road.
It's a private road.
You needed the bond, even though it was a private road, you still needed the bond to
No,
get
it-
your lot
it
releases.
was
How would you get
literally
lot
not.
releases
No.
if you didn't,
It's a
okay?
because it's a single lot.
It isn't. Well,
Yes,
it's
it
not,
is.
it's not
So-
anymore.
It is.
The
It's a
next
single
thing
lot.
is, you're,
The homeowners association is a single lot. It's one lot.
And that had to be released as well, so you had to release that lot. So
It's one
well,
lot.
I think that it's disproportionate to withhold the whole bond for this one potential issue.
that's what I'm trying to get to.
I don't know what the answer is.
Please read
It's-
the bond, Warren. Please,
No.
please read the
Well,
tri-party agreement.
No.
because first of all, what he's saying is that this issue is on Field Lane, where Dean Lane meets it, which
Can
may,
you send?
I'm trying.
Get the email from Janet, please, and then he's
So,
gonna
Jeff,
read
what
the
were you
tri-party
saying?
agreement.
well,
Can you pull it up?
they have a $40,000 bond that's been withheld for several years.
It's
That
holding up sales
encompasses,
of property.
that encompasses the
That's not
whole
our problem.
project.
Could
It is your problem.
No, it's
Excuse
not.
me, would
No,
you let
excuse
him
me.
finish?
I'm saying, yes,
Yeah.
they're in the way of
Right
this,
now.
but I would recommend a substantial release of the bond.
I'm agreeing with you. I would like to release substantial, but I'd still like to leave some money set aside in case there is an issue out there that will quickly be resolved and give them the rest of it.
And there
If they
may
want
not,
to sit
there
there
may
and
not
act
even be an issue.
No.
We
all
don't
or
know.
nothing, then,
Yeah.
you know, that's up to the board.
No,
I
we're
can-
not asking you for a partial release. We're asking you for the total release of the bond.
Does the board-
Because the tri-party agreement excluded 100% Dean Lane.
Okay, so I've had the opportunity to consider this for quite some time. Developer sent me quite a bit of information. I've shared it with the board through the website. I think you had a good idea. There is an option for a small bond for a potential problem, a potential existing drainage problem.
On
That
what-
might
on
get
what
Will you let her talk for a friggin' minute, please? You don't have to interrupt every
Why don't
time.
you just ask him to stop?
I didn't swear, I didn't
Oh,
swear.
friggin'.
Frickin's
Well,
not
maybe I don't
swearing.
like it.
So, obviously, the property owner is the developer is very interested in getting the $40,000 bond. They've offered that it's a big concern for them, and it's holding up other deals. Not that it's your problem, but one way to do it would be to request a small bond or on some sort of surety for the remainder, for the other potential drainage problem.
For what property? For what property?
Well, I think if we did that, we would limit it to what's been discussed in this meeting.
The connection between Dean Lane and Cooper
and
road system.
And Field.
So, you condition votes all the time. You could
I
consider.
mean, we don't want to make this into a punch list that goes on and on and on.
It was a punch list 2 years ago, and
Right.
it got
And
resolved.
for that, you should, I think, have your bond released. But if there is a problem that, and I think Anna's point is correct, didn't the planning board go through this with gristmill for years and years and years with fighting the developer to, you know.
Mary Shepherd we went through it with too.
Oh, Mary, okay.
We ended
But
up taking-
anyway.
We ended up taking the bond from the developer and Mary Shepherd to finish all the
Yeah.
problems with Mary
Right.
Shepherd.
So it shouldn't be.
Okay.
So what do you think it should be?
I would like to speak.
We're discussing right now, I'll get back to you in a minute. What do you think it should be? 35 and keep 5? Get green out there as quickly as possible, or, yeah, green out there as quickly as possible to make sure that the connection between Cooper and Dean doesn't have a water issue.
Cooper is signed off, Mark.
Bartlett, what do you think?
I think if we have a resident telling us there's an issue, I think we
On
need
what
to look at
parcel?
that issue.
You just heard between Cooper and
14th.
Dean, are you gonna, how many times do we have to tell?
Okay,
That's
well
what I'm
then,
talking
maybe none of you have looked at the tri-party agreement.
We don't care about it. We care about
I
the
do
water
think-
coming off Cooper.
It's a contract, Mark.
What do you think, Anna?
So I do believe that we should withhold some portion of it. Some of it can be released. I have read the tri-party agreement, and there are two concerns
what's it
that I
say?
have.
Please explain it to me,
Under-
what your
I
opinion
am
of it is.
taking a look at, it would be page 2, item number 9. It says, "This roadway escrow agreement does not affect the over 55 development," which is the Dean Lane, "which shall remain subject to the terms of the covenant until all work is completed or substitute security satisfactory to the planning board has been provided." Okay? So that's
Dean
part of,
Lane
that's
is
what we're
exempt from
trying
that.
to do.
It just says it's included in it. It's part of the tri-party.
Exempt.
I don't,
I'll reread it.
I don't,
This-
yeah, I think that's
This
not the case.
roadway escrow agreement does not affect the over 55 development,
Okay,
which
so
shall
that's the-
remain subject to the terms of the covenant until all work is completed or substitute security satisfactory to the planning board has been provided.
For Dean Lane.
No, it doesn't say
It doesn't
Dean
say
Lane,
Dean
Mark.
Lane. It says,
I
other
would,
than
I would
Dean Lane.
interpret that to say that, yes, it does include Dean Lane,
It
but
doesn't.
not, but in a separate category. I don't know, I mean, I think it's,
It says
That's
not
what I believe.
Dean Lane.
I
Not
believe
Dean
that
Lane.
gives you.
But the issue is not on Dean Lane.
I believe that gives you the authority to request a separate security for this drainage issue.
Correct.
if there is a drainage issue.
There's not a drainage
And we
issue.
accept that there may be.
Why?
So
Can you
the board
ask me
has-
if
the
that
board-
Fran asked you what the items were that were outstanding on Dean Lane were?
I did reach out to the residents, which is not unusual when we have discussions with developers. And there is the homeowners association as, well, the residents as a group did not have a concern with a new house being constructed on Dean Lane.
That has
on the
nothing to do with what
open
we were talking
unit.
about.
They would like to see the issue resolved. And there is some runoff from the empty lot to Dean Lane. Recent past, it has washed some sand and debris from the lot
Because
onto
of why?
Dean Lane. And residents did reference a drainage issue, some puddling, and raised the concern that it might be icing problem in the winter.
It got addressed last year. There was one icing problem on one lot.
No, this
That got-
was.
No,
This was-
I talked to Fran yesterday. She literally said she has no objection to what we did. There
You
is,
know what, we're done, we're done here. There's a
All right,
board-
thank you. Let's go.
Resident that had
Let's go.
an issue.
We're all set.
Any
Let's move.
specific issue. So,
Does the board want to do a partial release?
No, I don't want any partial
no, we
release,
don't
Mark.
want to release on
I don't
that.
want a release.
We want to release on the entire surety bond for Cooper Farm, which is nothing to do with Dean Lane.
You know, in that way, and then keep 5 because,
or do a conditional,
yeah.
A partial does nothing for the predicament that we have.
It's not, and it's not a option.
Are you willing to put another?
I'll put $500 in a bond for sweeping the road, and which will amount to a shoebox worth of sand at the bottom. I drove by it. Can someone
So,
please
perhaps-
just drive around the subdivision
5 or 10.
tomorrow?
1,000 to keep.
$5,000.
Yeah.
Give us a
Don't
bond for
bother.
5,000, release it.
We will-
Don't bother.
Take that.
No,
Take it.
we will give you a bond, we will give you
Take
a
it.
$500
No,
bond.
500 does nothing, really, come on.
Really?
What do you think? 5,000?
Don't bother. Let's go.
No, I'd be happy with 5,000.
Can you-
5,000.
For what?
I'm not.
For what,
For
2
what?
years? For what,
Can you
10
please
days
tell me
worth?
what it is?
You're gonna
For
give
what?
us a $5,000 bond.
For what?
So that we can have a consultant go out there to make sure there is
I'm
no
not gonna
issues.
pay for a consultant to go out there.
No, take a look at it and make sure it's okay.
I'm not paying.
You can ask,
It's-
you can literally, no,
I'm not
wait,
paying.
please.
What are you-
The town can pay.
No,
Stop.
Mr. Chair, Martin.
go ahead.
Please, we've had,
there's funding for consultant.
We'll pay for the consultant. We want 5,000 in case there's a problem because we're not chasing you
Not
for the money.
happening.
Then you're
Mark,
getting nothing. I'm giving you an
someone
option.
please-
Go for it.
You're gonna
No.
take 2
We'll
years. to
spend
go
the
to-
town
Yeah.
more money on
Oh my God. You're gonna
Please.
take 2
Stop,
years,
stop.
take
Take
the
it.
money,
Please.
take the money.
Take
it. It doesn't help, Mark.
If you take,
Stop,
we'll give you
stop this
all
stuff right now.
40,000, as long as you
Listen.
come back with a passbook loan of something for $5,000, we'll give you all 40 of that entity, the
I
whole
will do
thing.
that.
You get that,
I will do that, and I will say, okay, we'll do that.
okay?
But
And you'll
I
likely
would-
get that back too.
And we'll give it back to you in 10 days or whatever, as long
Okay.
as this issue's
I would
resolved.
like you to have the people who already had previously gone out and looked at it, as far as the building commissioner, who went out and looked at it.
We're gonna have Green go out and take a look at it. They've looked at it all along. We're gonna make sure it's all done. You're gonna give me a separate thing. You're gonna give me 5,000 in a checkbook, in a passbook. I'm gonna give you your $40,000 so
I'll do
that
that.
entity is
I'll do that,
released.
but-
And then we'll just have that. And if everything's good, and like you said, you get your $5,000 back in 10 days. I can't do any more than that. I think I'm
I'll do
good.
that, but I want everybody to understand that the surety bond was for Cooper Farm and not Dean Lane. Please acknowledge that. Just please acknowledge that.
Sure, okay, if that's what you want.
Yep.
I don't even want you to come back. We're gonna have
It should have been done as an
It should have been done
Okay,
2 years ago, but we're dealing with you two, so what can I tell you?
Mark, that's an insult.
Hey.
Oh, please.
Mr. Chair, can we
Please.
move on?
It's time, we're gonna give you
Michael,
some.
hush.
You bring back a passport.
I'll do that, I'll do that.
As soon as we get somebody out there, as soon as they okay it,
So I'm
Marty
certain-
will release it, right?
Time certain, 10 days.
10 days, if you get it done in 10 days, you get
If
your
you
money.
don't
back.
get it
There's no,
done in
there's
10
no,
days.
I mean, like, so if I bring down a check for $2,500 and Matt brings down a check for $2,500 tomorrow, will you release the surety bond?
Yes.
Okay.
We'll hold the checks, once everybody says that drainage issue out there is taken care of, you'll get both your checks back and you'll get your bond whenever, tomorrow,
Okay.
next day after. That's all I'm
And
asking.
you acknowledge that the surety bond.
Certified check.
It's certified check.
Excellent, thank you.
Certified checks.
So, soon as you.
Certified checks tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
All right, Maren has all the stuff from Lowell 5 for the tri-party agreement.
Let's go, Dad.
What?
I can't watch anymore.
I'd like a second on that.
I'm going to ask the vote, you should stay to make sure the
I would like
vote
to second
vote
on
for
it.
it.
Okay.
So I'll entertain a motion to approve the release of the $40,000 for the
A surety
tri-party
bond.
agreement back to the fields as long as they post two certified, we don't care.
$5,000.
$5,000 in total that we will hold for no more than 10 days as long as we get a consultant out there and there's no problems with the road. If there's a problem with the road, then we're gonna have to address the road.
I so move.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You happy?
Yep.
Thank you.
Can you let us know when you're going out? I'll go with you.
We'll call Green tomorrow, we'll have Green go out there. And we'll
Thank
take
you.
care of it. Mr. Fields, by the way, I'm sorry about the loss of your wife.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
That was.
Thank you.
Okay? Am I still 0 for 3 or 1 for 3?
Stop.
I got him.
Okay, 8:15, board business, minutes of the prior meeting,
Not really yet.
not done yet.
Meet every 2 weeks, it's not possible.
Bills, you have any bills?
You do have bills. 3 peer-review bills for Green International, one for Newtown Road, one for Crop Common, and one for the 9 Air Road.
So, getting back, you're gonna talk to Green tomorrow, you're gonna meet with people down
Can I
there.
ask a simple question? Did you change the order of when you were taking on 555 King Street in the fields?
No, we were just running late. We had
Didn't
two
work
other things.
after?
5:55 was before the fields. Fields are on at 8 o'clock, there's a agenda right there if you wanna look at it, Mr. Scott.
Damn, I was confused. I apologize. I thought,
No, it's right there in black and blue. They were at 8 o'clock. We were a little late because everything ran long, especially in fact, but they were in the right progression. Thank you.
While we're signing this, Lauren, I have a quick question. There's an email you sent to us about the Mart. It's next Wednesday. And you had asked if others were going to attend. Did everybody?
It's a remote, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Member input, member update on projects. Go ahead. Oh,
Well,
I'm
sorry.
No, go ahead. Hurry up, I need to take a shower.
So, TAC is going to post, I believe that TAC is going to post a meeting with MART, and so two representatives of the planning board are on TAC. So Anna's wondering if both reps are going, or if she's added, then if that's a quorum of the planning board.
Yep, so Jeff's on TAC and
Mark's the alternate, I think.
So-
I am? What was it, last week I got voted, or last month I got voted on it?
You were in the
Thanks.
hospital.
I'm in the
I did
hospital.
that
You
to
made
you.
that.
Actually, that was before, I think. When we did elections.
So Bartlett or Delisa, are you guys going to go to that meeting next week, the Mart meeting?
Yeah, I'm planning, but it's remote.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm planning
but she
to,
still needs to know
yeah.
for,
What meeting are you talking about?
Wait, what day is it again?
it's Wednesday.
Wednesday at 5:30, a remote meeting.
Yeah, I'm planning on it.
Okay. Then I can post it as a planning board meeting as well.
Yeah.
It's a quorum of the planning board. We'll likely attend the TAC meeting with Mart to discuss. Well, the good news is that Mart got a grant, Montechusett Area Regional Transit got a, Montechusett Regional Transit Agency, sorry, got a $400,000 grant to expand transit services in Littleton, Stowe, Boxborough, and Bolton. It's a 3-year grant. New rides will be offered by MART, and they will do the dispatch, and they will, and so this meeting is to figure out what types of services that you've heard that the town might want, and then also pick your brains about what type of outreach would help get the word out there. They're thinking everything from if there's a daily van that goes to the beach, what areas should it stop at? Or if there's a group of students that want to use this transportation for X, Y, or Z, willing to do that. If there's a senior gathering, can Mart be able to help with the services? And it'll be really a rather large expansion on the services that are offered in town now through Council on Aging's agreement with MART. So it's really very exciting to have this.
Great.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So anyway, long explanation. for-
Excited. Nope, it's great. Very helpful.
Any other member updates?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, MPIC. So we have been updating our progress, the implementation of the master plan, and Laura Yates, who is the chairperson, will be presenting it to the select board. She thinks Monday, but I'm not sure if she's on the schedule. It is Monday, okay, she was gonna check. So, and then we will, once the select board has taken a look at it, it will be posted to the town website for people to view and see where we are in each aspect of the master plan, so.
Great.
And then we do have a meeting, we're planning on meeting after the school year begins, so this fall.
Cool.
There's a part of the public process for the open space recreation plan is Tuesday. I have it down at 7, but I'm not sure that's correct. But anyway, so if anyone is interested, please attend.
Anything else? Okay.
So the Affordable Housing Trust met on Tuesday. We reorganized and we're updating the forms for LRAP, the assistance program that we have for residents in Littleton. We are trying to move forward with Durkee Farm, with the Durkee Farmhouse, and that may include a visit to the house to find a line that goes to a well. It's important to find and cap the well. If needed, so that Jim from the Department of Health will sign off, because otherwise he won't be able to sign off, because if it's within 100 feet of the septic system, that's a no-no. Then we also, as the Affordable Housing Trust, reviewed the RFP for Tehadwan Road for a potential Habitat for Humanity home. The trustees made a few edits to the RFP, and then now needs to go to town council, and then that would get issued out to the community by the town administrator's office.
Cool. That's about it.
Yeah, and then we have the kind of other ones that we talked about, perhaps updating Northern Bank and Hager.
I think Jeff gave us kind of an update.
Yeah. Yeah, Northern Bank is doing their thing. They will build the bank branch first. They have an agreement with the water department. They are remediating the invasive plants on the property per the Conservation Commission. If the water, and I'm not sure, they didn't sound like they were, other than the agreement, they didn't sound like they had been updated. Well, I don't know. I don't know what the schedule of the sewer is. But they are going to pursue connecting to one of the existing septic systems on site if the sewer isn't there when they're ready for it. Once the bank is built, they will then go forward with tearing down the other 2 buildings of the property.
Okay. Hager, I think we all drive by Hager, we see they're doing everything they can to try to, it's costing them a fortune.
We don't have a contact, and I reached out to the development consultant, who may not be involved now, I don't know, but I haven't heard back. So, but we're getting slapped around by people like, you let that happen, and
We told them we wanted to preserve it.
Right, and the developer is working closely with the building department, which is the proper department at the moment. And they did provide a punch list of reasons that they had to take more of the structure down than they had hoped, that had initial hoped.
Doing the best they can to keep the structure.
There's 2 walls left.
Three.
Well,
3 more.
Yeah.
I think it is possible that in the end it may turn out okay, but it's possible still.
It's going to cost them a fortune to preserve that.
Well, remember they
I know, we gave them.
we gave them
We
some,
gave them extra money, yep.
and they got extra money from the septic, the sewer.
So we're, what's our next meeting scheduled? August 15th, my birthday, right?
No. August 3rd.
Where am I?
There's
have
another
another
one on
meeting on your
the,
birthday
I'll be late
too.
for that. I'll pull a Jeff and I'll be late for that. August 3rd?
August 3rd. We have a very full agenda already. The continued hearing for 550 Newtown Road, that's the Storage Rentals America. Continued public hearing for 555 Newtown Road, that's Skyview Lane. The peer review on Skyview Lane has not started yet. Still waiting for a check from the developer to cover the cost for the peer review.
May I suggest that we give them a deadline, that if we don't receive it, then they can't be on the agenda, because otherwise we'll have that waiting period of...
Well, right now I've scheduled it for 15 minutes, so, yeah, I hear you.
Okay,
On that,
thank
I've
you.
been going through that thought process. We have, I didn't hear, we'll have the continued discussion on the preliminary subdivision for 550 King Street. We have informal discussion on a potential residential subdivision at 95 Taylor Street. He's got a 5 or 6 lot open space concept and a 5 or 6 lot conventional concept to run by the board, get some feedback. I believe that 12 Robinson Road will be in for the site plan review for redevelopment in the Village Common District. This is, Joe Cataldo has purchased the former
Well, he
lot.
has not actually, purchase isn't final yet. He has a purchase and sale.
Okay, thank you.
And he's somewhat frustrated with the process, but
Right. I believe that the last sketch plan I saw was 4 units total, 1 in the house, 1 in the barn, and 2 in the rear of the property. And then we got a new application from Sanctuary Medicinals at 234 Taylor Street to renew their adult use marijuana establishment special permit, amend the site plan, and amend the Water Resource District special permit to allow for an addition. So,
I have one more update. I forgot. The water department is going to reach out to the owners of 245 Foster Street to talk to them, since they now own you probably know this, right? Since they now own the old Parley lumber, they're talking about trying to connect together, as Mr. Sanders was talking about maybe the potential of looking into whether the sewer could go down there, because they're going to need more capacity themselves, and they've studied that property, and that between them and the nursing home is perfect for expansion of what we already have as a sewer. So they at least are going to reach out and talk to them.
What are they putting in at where Pardee was?
They're only buying it right now for storage,
Oh.
but the thought is to come down King Street where the facility is.
well, it's the LELWD is buying it.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you meant, okay, I'm sorry.
All right, so they're buying it, and then the thought is to bring it right
Right.
down the side of the highway and bring it over there and either use they need more, they're gonna need more capacity eventually. They're gonna need a bigger boat. And either use some of the land that's at the nursing home, or maybe talk to the owners of 245 Foster Street about some sort of arrangement where they get sewer and they get more capacity over there. But at least they're
That would be great.
trying to talk to one another, or going to be talking to one another.
Mill Hill property conservation land goes right up to 495,
Right.
between Parley and Harwood. So how are they going to go through
They're-
conservation land?
No, they're on the other side. They want to go right along the highway. That side,
On the
not that side.
on
The
the far side.
495 side. Run right down. It takes them it's going to be a little harder, but it would be easy for them if they could get the state to let them run it on the state side.
On the state side of the fence?
Yeah. Then they could get all the way down.
Okay.
It may work, it may not work, but
Yeah.
that's kind
Okay.
of what they would think.
It's worth a shot.
It's worth a talk, but they're at least all the way down to Parley, and then it's
So in that scenario, what would be at 245 Foster Street?
it's probably the underground dispersion, what do you call it?
The leach field.
The leaching fields.
Okay.
And then they would, whatever they did would go backwards and then come, leach back. They need more, they think eventually they're gonna need more leaching capacity. So, at least they wanna have the discussion with them, so that's what Nick told me. Okay. So that's the only other thing I know. And where are we at with the well site? Is it still the well's still good and heading to Boxborough? Is that still?
progressing. Yes, nothing really new.
Snail's
with
pace,
that
but-
front. Well, it's coming along, so.
Great. I think we're done.
Great. I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Missed it. What?
You got on the agenda, man, you got a phone, it said public input.
We already asked you. You didn't say anything.
No, you didn't ask public input, Mr. Chairman, I disagree with you.
Wait a second. Oh, yeah, it's the last one. You're right. All right,
Sorry.
come on up closer.
You've got 2 minutes.
You got
Come a little closer?
2
Starting
minutes,
now.
yeah, come
1,
closer. Didn't I
2.
let you talk enough tonight? Jesus.
It took half a minute to walk up here.
This is not a town meeting where you talk about everything. You don't talk about certain stuff.
George Sanders, 672 Great Road. Mr. Chairman, I want to be serious when I say this to you. What happened in this chamber tonight should have never occurred, and it should never have been broadcast. You get in a situation like that, you need to stop the televising of the meeting and get the meeting under control. Now, not defending the fields, but I have a serious concern with whoever the engineer was that was to inspect Dean Lane and come back to you and tell you that the lane is all set, that the town can accept it, or whatever the case is. Out of all the water that has fallen in the last month and a half, there's no reason on green earth that somebody from that company should have went out and checked the drainage on that street and came in here when you know you had a bond that was going to be released to the fields. There's no reason that you do not know from that company that that drainage out there is A-OK. That's all I want to say, Mr. Chairman.
I'm going to respond to these. You are absolutely 100% correct. I should have stopped that, and I apologize to the residents who watched it tonight and the members of the board. I should have stopped it right in there, and I should not have let the fields continue. I was wrong. I am absolutely appalled that I let that keep going. I feel terrible about it. Getting back to your point, they keep saying that Dean Lane has nothing to do with the drainage. We sent an engineer down there who took it and signed off on all the stuff from Cooper Farm. The residents are the ones that are telling us there's an issue on Dean Lane. We're getting it right now while we have the money still in hand. That's why we
I
addressed it
understand
every
that.
day.
I don't disagree with what you were
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah.
I do not disagree at all.
But you were right, and I should have stopped him right there. I should have done, when we have somebody that's confrontational, like Anna did a couple of years ago, I should have had somebody here to remove them because they were obviously disruptive, and I apologize because I let it continue.
But
That was wrong on
George,
my part.
I don't know, are we allowed to stop recording?
Yeah, you're allowed to stop
I mean,
recording.
Then do we get
I don't think we
attacked
really
or-
are.
Yeah, you can stop.
I should have stopped the meeting. I shouldn't have stopped recording. I
Well,
should have
well,
stopped the meeting.
stop the meeting,
I should.
cut the voice on it, whatever.
Right. I should have, and I
Yeah.
apologize. I should have
Yeah,
handled
because
it
it
better.
started using profanity and
Yes.
in communication, you can't do that.
I should have stopped him right then and there, and I apologize. I tried to keep it under control, and obviously it didn't
Yeah,
happen.
I
And
know.
it's my fault. 30
No,
years, I should
no,
have
it's not
known that.
necessarily all your fault. I think that you have to look at the people that are coming in and what they're demanding. I thought he was very disrespectful to the board, if you want to ask the truth about it. Demanding, I mean, Ms. Tuhill doesn't work for him, so I don't know why he's demanding her to do this or do that, when it's really your job as the chair if you want her to read it. But I just think that it was bad taste, and I'm just saying, when you know something is like that is going to be released, then someone should have gave you the clearance to say they're good to go, you can give them their money back. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, now I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. So move. Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Can we finally
Thank you.
shut the meeting off? Oh my God. I should have done it that. I should have had the conference. That's what I should have done.
From now on.